audience what an NP complete problem is?
It means it's the hardest set of problems within the non-deterministic polynomial class, which the takeaway from that is it's really hard and you essentially have to try everything in order to know that you for sure got the best result.
So what you're saying is that basically the claim that Renee is making is quite a it's quite it's quite a large one.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to say that you can, in polynomial time, decide what the optimal route through the Lightning Network is actually really cool. Uh, the disappointment I have with it is that it requires preconditions that I believe are unlikely to take, because it would require setting the base fees to zero, which means that you create incentive problems. I think, Alex, you could probably comment more about this since you talk about it a lot, but I think you were saying that in LND the PPM fees are rounded down, so with a sufficiently small payment, that no fees actually end up getting paid, and the only way to fight against that is to have non-zero base fees.
It's not LND specific. That's just the protocol, because it's a percentage, and it's working on a number that can only represent so much precision. Um, and the way it's described is 1 out of 1 million. So if you have less than 1 million, it has to do something with it. And the way that the protocol is written is it will go down. So yeah, there is some number, and this is not like a new discovery. People have noticed this a long time, and if you implement it, you'll see that you have to round down. Um, there's ways you can work around it. You can cut off the smallest size of transactions. You can bump up your PPM fee to much higher. Um, but I think that's like illustrating also that it's your node. You could do whatever you want with it. So that's a challenge when it comes to optimizing for a network of people who could just do anything that they want. It might work in a paper, but in reality, it might not actually help you.
So, question from a guy who here is not a coder, but I mean, are you saying like you can't make it round up? Like, there's a reason why you can't make it round up?
I mean, you could offer more fees if you wanted to.
No, I mean, like, to you as the guy who makes the protocol, can you change the protocol to round up instead of down? Like, can you fork LND and everybody run one that rounds up instead?
Well, everybody could just do it in their own client. You could offer more funding, and you could reject things that don't. There's no consensus rule that you're breaking. It's just kind of like how people interact with each other. And currently, the way that people interact with each other is to round out.
Do is it not worth what seems like a small change, like the improvements that you
Well,
get in
I
routing?
don't think rounding down is the
I don't know
problem.
if there are any improvements. I mean, I think that's still to be demonstrated that there's actually any improvement.
Yeah, I don't think the issue is whether it rounds up or down. I think it's the idea that um, that essentially zero base fee is useful. And so just for the audience, the way it works is basically if you are operating a node in a Lightning Network, you basically there's a number of different parameters that you can set for your own node. Well, a ton of them actually, but two of the most significant ones are your base fee, which is the transaction, which is the cost for routing anything through you, whether it is a 1 sat transaction or an 100 sat transaction or a 1 million sat transaction. And then there's also your fee rate, which is the amount that is charged per 1 million sats that is routed through you. And the Lightning Network can be thought of as this sort of competitive market where everyone is trying to, or not trying to, but they are incentivized to essentially kind of undercut each other in order to get the best, the most routes through them, earn the most, and so that's kind of what's going on here. So Renee has argued that setting base fees to zero, that is to say, the amount that you are paid as a routing node, because again, the Lightning Network is this sort of spider web of nodes. And if I have a channel with JC, and then JC has a channel with Jestifer, and then Jestifer has a channel with Keegan, and Keegan has a channel with Alex, I can basically bounce payments all the way through the network in order to, make a Lightning payment to Alex. I don't have to be directly connected to him, and so that's one of the really cool things about the Lightning Network. And as I understand it, Renee is basically arguing that we should all set our base fees to 0, because that will allow this problem, which is a much more difficult problem to solve and takes a lot of computational power. It will allow us to simplify that computation in order to make it in order to create much more efficient routing systems.
Well, I think you need to be careful about how you describe solve. So there's like two kinds of solve. There's one kind of solve, which is solve an equation on paper. And there's another kind of solve, which is like deliver results to people.
That's a great point.
And I think if you think about base fee, you think about a fixed fee plus a percentage fee in the context of splitting up a payment into many different pieces. You can see why it's complicated to optimize, because the more you split up your payment into more little pieces, you're incurring more of these fixed fees. So that makes a pathfinding kind of fee optimization difficult, because if I split it into 100,000 pieces, now I have to think, oh, am I really saving any money in the base fees? Because those base fees are stacking up. So if you're just thinking about it from a calculus point of view, it would be very nice if those base fees didn't exist. And I wouldn't argue that base fees should be substantial, but the reason that they were introduced was to introduce a cost into attaching an HTLC, like a conceptual cost. Because there is a cost, you can only process so many HTLCs at a single time. If an HTLC goes to the chain, you'll pay an additional chain fee for it. So conceptually, splitting up the payment into a billion, bajillion little shards can work very well in a simulation. But if you actually try it in real life, you're gonna maybe hit problems. One of those HTLCs is gonna get stuck or something like that. So that's kind of like the solution side of things. It's like, how can we actually optimize? How can we use splitting to deliver better experiences for people that interacts with the real network?
So Alex, are you a fan of the idea of multipath payments?
Well, I think that they are good. They're great in situations where you are just fundamentally constrained with the amount of capital that you're able to send out of your channels. So one use that we use it for with Lightning Loop is if you want to send the funds of let's say you want to send the funds of all your channels and you want to send them all out to the chain. So one way to do that is that you could close all of your channels and you could pay a bunch of close fees, and now your channels are dead. Or you could use the Lightning Loop service and you could send the off-chain, you could send the contents of all the channels off-chain and off-chain HTLCs. You lock them to the loop server. The loop server sends you one on-chain HTLC because it's receiving all of those different HTLCs in multipath payment.
Oh, interesting.
And now what used to take you, maybe 10 on-chain transactions, now it's only resulting in one on-chain transaction. But that's a very situational use.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of multipath payments, but I don't think it's necessarily solving a lot of problems, because while that is a great, that's a cool use case. One way that it can go wrong is maybe one, you're trying to send a payment off chain, and one piece gets to the server, but you're trying to send the other piece, and it's just not getting there. So one piece is waiting. While it's waiting, it's tying up liquidity across the route. It's tying up HTLC slots, which are limited across the route. So by default, the normal payment system, it's not going to wait around forever. It'll actually only wait for 2 minutes. So what you'll see is you'll try to pay. It's going to wait for 2 minutes. The 2-minute timer will be up. Then the payment will fail back. So now you have to try again. Maybe when you try again, you'll have the same thing happen. So it can be not as good to do multipath payment. You kind of have to use it situationally to actually get a good experience.
Oh, interesting. And again, just for everyone listening, what we're talking about here is in the Lightning Network. Again, as I said, it's like this sort of spider web. It's a an acyclic graph, and you can basically, I don't have to have a direct connection to any specific person in order to send them payments over the Lightning Network for essentially, currently, very close to zero fees and instantaneously. And there is the problem is that you can only send fees that basically can kind of route through these large channels if you are trying to send a large payment. And so Rene has basically it has developed a I don't know if it's an algorithm or a system, but basically to allow, he's advocating for what are called multipath payments, which is if I want to send a full Bitcoin to Alex, because our nodes are not directly connected, I can basically I can either try to find a route directly to him where I'm sending him a full Bitcoin, or I can basically split that payment up to into many different pieces, and then they will all sort of like rejoin at his node, and he will then receive that payment. Is that a fair characterization, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just to be clear, like I'm not like advocating for big base fees. I also think that base fees should be minimal, and also like I think that multipath payment can be a super useful tool, and it's kind of like something that you can put in your toolbox, and the algorithms to optimize it are not solved. That's like we can always do better. So I think that's kind of like the path to doing better is like creating papers, studying techniques. I think I just don't want people to think like, oh, we've solved routing. That's kind of like an ongoing process.
And one of the other things is that just because, so the description of the problem being NP complete, and that's, what that means is that in order to solve it, as in find the best possible solution, you have to essentially try them all. What that does not necessarily communicate is that if you can actually get something really close to the best possible one using various randomized algorithms in significantly shorter time. And most of the time that's good enough for people because you don't necessarily need the best possible route throughout what is now a 25,000 node network with many more, like many times that in the number of channels. So the result is definitely cool from an academic perspective, but it's far from necessary in a live environment.
So can I just take a quick poll of the speaker? So I reached out to Rene and I was trying to get him to join the space today. But can I just do a quick poll of like, do we feel on stage that the Rene's claims are more academic versus practical, or do we feel like there are super important and meaningful conclusions that can be drawn from that? And should we be trying? Should we all basically set our base fees to zero, which is the argument that Rene is making in order to allow us to optimize the Lightning Network? What do you think, Justifer? Do you have an opinion? No is a totally acceptable answer, by the way.
Let's see. I definitely don't want to stop anyone from exploring their theories on the Lightning Network or making important developments on it. So I certainly wouldn't want to discourage anyone from coming up with it. Of course, at the same time, my node has real costs of operation, and I don't want to change my policies based on, I don't know, this attempt at solving a very difficult routing problem. So I won't be dropping my base fees to zero at this point.
So I have an opinion about this. If now first, I want to know that it was worth it, because if there's a negligible difference, then there's no point even talking about it. But if it were shown that it actually meaningfully improved the routing, very meaningfully, such that it was worth pursuing, I think there are ways it could be done which wouldn't hurt somebody like just for who values minimum transactions, while also not like killing the incentives and incentivizing like free spam attacks. You could round up for one, and you could also have like a minimum amount that you'll route. So, if you so that way there's some non-zero cost. Plus, if Justfor doesn't even want to have any kind of like 10 sat transactions going through him, then he can then he doesn't have to. So it can be solved like on a protocol level through LND or through C Lightning or wherever, where you could get rid of the base fee without meaning that there were free transactions available. So if it were worth it, I would support, putting it into the base protocol.
Are these things mutually exclusive? Like I understand JC what you're saying, like in terms of, hey, if we're gonna have zero base fees, and it's like then we need a certain amount to route because of the percentage. But I'm wondering if that does that skew anything in Renee's paper, or is that are those two things I guess you could say those two things can exist and still you have the efficiencies of what Renee's proposing.
It would be like just saying that I can't route through this node. My payment's too small, so it's not even in the running. Just like channels that are too small for the payment that you're trying to push through are also not in contention. So I think it's just about, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it's just about optimizing your choices.
Yeah, for the record, I don't think that there is an NP completeness concern with setting min HTLC because what you're think about it this way: the routing problem is a constraint optimization problem, and so the first thing you have to do is you have to any payment that is too small, even on the iteration, right? Because the way that Renee's scheme works is that you might try something, and then anything that is to like any overflow on a particular channel gets kind of spilled over into new channels, and you can just at every point in that iteration prune the channel graph for all of the and remove all of the channel edges that have min HTLCs that are higher than whatever your remaining payment is. And so that part is relatively straightforward. The thing that gets tough is when you are trying to do the optimization, which is when once you've eliminated all of the things that just flat out won't work, how do you decide which one's the best one? And that's the part that's really the NP complete part.
Yeah, and so taking base fee out of that exponentially improves or decreases the complexity of the question. But I don't know, again, if it's worth, for example, thinking that you need to change the way LND works to do it.
Right, and so the paper, the cool thing about it, and the thing that it's really trying to push is this notion of optimality, right? It was able to essentially prove that under these conditions, it can very quickly find the best possible route. But what it does not say is that, all right, let's assume for a moment that you can't find the best route. How much worse is the So you end up with, in a multipath payment scenario, you end up with a bunch of different routes all to the same destination. And then the receiver then takes the pre-image for that hash and uses it to redeem the HTLCs. And that happens in a backwards manner. But if, for whatever reason, not all, if you don't wait for all of the routes to get constructed along the way, all the way to the destination, then what happens is that if one of the routes is all the way to the destination and the other one's only halfway there, and you reveal the secret pre-image, then presumably the one that's only halfway there doesn't actually have to get all the way to the destination, and they can come by the payment pre-image through some other means and steal the payment halfway through. I think that's the actual mechanics underneath that. Yeah.
And I'm curious if anybody here knows, just came to my mind, but how does KeySend prevent the issue that a zero invoice has, where the intermediate nodes can essentially forward you, less than the whole payment? Let's say on a tip, let's say you're tipping me, I'm a musician, I have a little QR code, and it's a zero invoice, which means you can send any amount. And somebody tips me 5,000 sats. Now, I don't know how much he's tipping me, so the node on the way to me takes half of them, gives me 2,500 sats, and I claim that payment and say, thanks for the 2,500 sats, and I get paid 2,500, and the guy in front of me also gets 2,500, but I don't know that because I didn't know. But now with KeySend, I don't ever hear anybody talking about this problem, so I assume it was solved, but I don't know how. Does anybody know?
I do not.
It's a shame we don't have Alex anymore.
He's trying to rejoin right now.
Is he really? Okay. Look, this is the price we pay for using bleeding edge technology. The Lightning Network, Twitter Spaces,
Routing packets is harder than routing sats, believe it or not.
This is some bullshit.
We were asking for some topics earlier, Pete, and one topic that I would love to get some coverage on was, how did Plebnet get started?
Ooh, yeah, that is a phenomenal question. So, essentially, Plebnet hatched out of a golden egg. Okay, Theseus gave birth to this egg. No, what actually happened is JC, who I believe is on the stage and speaking, he has been super awesome about trying to orange pill as many people as possible, and then lightning pill them as well. And JC got D++ excited about Lightning, and specifically LNTX bot. And then there was a community that was created that grew into a different community, that grew into a larger community. I got involved, and basically it's kind of gone from there. So there was a Clubhouse Lightning group, and then there was a Coin Beast group that D started, and then we got kicked out of there, and that turned into the Plebnet Telegram group, which currently exists. And essentially it's been all of us like learning about Lightning together, right? Because there's this interesting there's this thing that happens where basically like everybody or people who are successful at running Lightning routing nodes, there is a bit of an incentive to kind of protect your own alpha, right? To basically protect the edge that you have discovered, and that can kind of be counter to the growth of the larger network. And the thing that to me is so compelling about Bitcoin and the Lightning Network specifically is that those incentives over the medium term and the long term tend to actually align. And so all of us basically, there's like, I don't know, maybe 20 of us who were like, we want to learn how Lightning works and we want to run effective Lightning nodes. And we all kind of got together and started this PlebNet group. And then we have been collaborating together, trying new things, and kind of growing from there. And creators who have been building these really effective tools, whether it's Alex Bosworth or Small World, who has built LN Node Insight, or Gridflare, who has built this really cool command line utility that basically allows you to optimize your centrality and more effectively figure out which channels might be valuable or which ones you should close. Or Severin, who has built lnrouter.app. These are all these rapidly developing systems and tools that are allowing us to kind of make the Lightning Network more robust. And it's been really cool because as we've built out the PlebNet and the groups that are associated with it, and there are a number of them, we've been able to collaborate in ways that I personally haven't seen happen in the Lightning Network at large. So people basically just sharing information and discoveries, understanding that the knowledge that benefits other individuals is also knowledge that benefits the larger Lightning Network. And so that's been very cool to see. And so
it's been a blast to watch, just because it seems like PlebNet has been finding all of the tools that have been quietly being built, and they're putting them to use. I mean, even my blog has been getting some use, as well as I attribute lots of Amboss's success to PlebNet. I mean, just as far as people using it, and just it's cool to watch LN Router app, as well as the LN Node Insight get a whole bunch of use. Yeah, and then the wiki just
yeah,
emerged.
totally. I was sad that Small World, who created LN Node Insight, which everybody who is running a Lightning node should definitely check out. He was originally going to join us, then wasn't able to join us today. But we are still so early, right? Like I feel like the Lightning Network is kind of where Bitcoin was like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, right? And it's really interesting to have conversations with people who were kind of OG, who are like OG Bitcoiners. Paul, who is a huge advocate of BIP300 and drive chains. That it's really interesting to interact with people who have not actually used the Lightning Network within the last 12 months and have not been able to see the incredible growth that's happening there. I think, everyone on stage has been actively participating, but I'm actually really curious, like, Matt, what has your experience been over the last 12, 24 months around the Lightning Network? What have you seen in terms of people getting on board? Have you noticed that more and more listeners are using Breeze to stream sats to you guys as you're running your podcasts?
I mean, we've come a long fucking way. I don't know. I mean, my learning experience personally with Lightning was one that was very bumpy and cost me a lot of sats. And I've personally seen the tools improve tremendously since then, in a way that could have guided me to not lose so much money. Mostly that was in on-chain fees, to be clear. So I think the streaming sats is an obvious use case. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I have 2 podcasts, but like literally see the sats coming in as people listen to it. Like as soon as you upload it, you just start seeing sats come in. It's the coolest fucking thing. It's just really, really tangible. And just secondary, I just feel like the UX of the biggest thing to me recently has been Moon Wallet, MUUN, and it's such an easy onboarding experience, and it completely caught me off guard. I did not. Maybe I was being like a little bit grumpy old timer, but I didn't expect that kind of UX to be so easy for someone who just wants to make a couple payments. And I'm like starting to think, I really love seeing the PlebNet initiative. I love the idea of the rings of fire in general in terms of creating liquidity. I mean, in the beginning, when I tried to pump liquidity into the system with Sovereign Lightning Tor nodes, which is what I think we need. I think we need this, a solid liquidity base of basically independent sovereign Bitcoiners running Lightning nodes through Tor. Otherwise, you'll just have big companies running them, and then the system gets captured relatively easily. So when I first tried to jumpstart it, I basically just created a huge bottleneck in my own node. Like we just had listeners would just open up channels with our node, and then we'd open a channel back, and that was just a horrible idea. That's why we lost so much money.
Yep.
So now we have this Rings of Fire idea, and it really builds like this solid liquidity base, which is just fantastic to see. And the combination of that and the mobile wallets, I start to question. I think it's good to have. We need to have the sovereign node base that is actually running these nodes. But at the end of the day, I think the overwhelming majority of people are probably just going to, have a mobile app, and they're just going to load it up with some sats, and they're just going to have no idea what's going on in the background. And that's probably good enough.
One question I had for you, Matt, was, since you come like as kind of, in my mind, an OG Bitcoiner that's very privacy focused, where you're kind of like free to disappear because you're being very thoughtful about the information that you're putting out there, and then coming into the Lightning Network, which seems to be almost reputational, where if someone knows about your node and they know who you are, then they might want to open a channel to you if they like the stuff you're doing. I mean, you put together 2 fantastic podcasts, so I'm sure you just get a lot of people that want to open channels to you. So I'm kind of curious what you think about Lightning Network as a social network and as being somewhat reputationally driven.
Right now, like the biggest issue on the privacy side of Lightning is receiving and routing. If you're sending, it makes a lot more sense. And basically in a privacy focused like sending environment, you're just really constantly spinning up nodes and then starting fresh again. Maybe open like 1 or 2 channels, maybe even use something like one of the light wallets, and you combine it with a VPN or Tor, and then you just use it for like a couple payments, and then you get rid of it. So it's not really that intuitive yet, but obviously just having things off chain should be a natural improvement. They're basically batch transactions. The whole reputational thing is so sticky, man. It does concern me a bit because I feel like it's very hard to run a Lightning routing node privately. You obviously should, and a lot of us do, run it natively through Tor, and we don't, ever expose the IP address. But every time you create an invoice, you're showing your pub key. So if you link it to yourself in any kind of an external way, it's all of your publicly broadcast channels are visible. So there's a lot of privacy gotchas, especially if you're trying to play the reputation game on routing and have a long-lasting node. I mean, I can't speak to it as well as a lot of other people on stage up here, but I definitely have the concerns. I can speak to the concerns. I can't speak to the intricacies of it. It's just there's so many gotchas everywhere.
Thank you. And actually, Vivek might be able to comment on this, but the Blockstream just came out with the nodes that
Greenlight. Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Do you think that might play a role in the privacy reputation piece of of running a node on the Lightning Network?
So I gotta hop real fast in 2 minutes for a meeting, but essentially, Greenlight was to create sort of a funnel for new users to get onboarded to Lightning really quickly. Not have to worry about the whole balancing capacity, routing aspects like that, and learn about it, and then eventually, go out and have their own Lightning node and try to make those trade-offs as thoughtful as possible with keeping your keys. However, like privacy, I don't necessarily think this is I want to say like a, proposed aspect of one of these trade-offs, but yeah, I guess you are having all the routing, I guess, would be done through whatever node your node that's being spun up is connected to. So I guess maybe you're not private because all those channels are connected to Blockstream's node or something. But I haven't like taken a deeper look at how these nodes are being spun up. Would definitely love to get Christian Decker to talk about this more in the future. But we just started this recently with Striga, previously known as Lastbit, and Sphinx. So yeah, I'm a bit out of the loop on the inner workings. Sorry, Justifer.
Well, yeah, sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot there. But I'm super curious because I think it'll be a big thing in the future.
I mean, yeah, it's cool. I guess the way even I remember Lalu talked about Neutrino. There's certain block filter aspects that make it a bit more private for like the lightweight clients. But I think the fundamental aspects of it just being like a hot wallet that needs to be interactive, that's very hard to solve. Yeah, I don't know if there's any way around that.
I mean, I think it could be pretty helpful on like the sending side once again. Because like on the sending side, if you're a spender, the idea is if you have ways to make easy, quick, disposable Lightning wallets, you can jump into, the permissionless network that is Lightning and make a couple payments that are not on chain with a single UTXO, and then just close it out and maybe do something else. Use it, spin up a new node in the future. But as far as like long-term routing or long-term receiving as a merchant, I mean, I don't see any kind of real privacy gains there.
Yeah, personally, I think about the allocation costs. I've essentially entrenched myself in building all this channel infrastructure. So, and there's a real cost to changing all of that infrastructure, closing my channels, opening new channels to different places. Yeah, as you found out in opening up reciprocal channels, there's a real cost to those allocations. So you have to be smart about using the mempool for that. Let's see, P, I didn't mean to hijack the conversation here, but we got the privacy folks and Blockstream with Greenlight. So I just super curious about that.
No, this is totally awesome. There's no it's the beauty of having an open-ended conversation without a specific agenda. So please continue. This is a super important conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to comment on, and obviously I have a very sort of particular point of view here, but I don't think that you can ever expect there to be privacy gains if that privacy is at the custodianship of another actor, right? Like, I don't have any problems with Blockstream whatsoever, but I'd be hard pressed to believe that you'd be getting privacy gains from having nodes hosted, whether that's from Voltage, whether that's from Blockstream, or I think there's another company doing it as well, or I think Nodl does some of it as well. In terms of hosted nodes. And there are plenty of great reasons to use hosted nodes, but I don't know that privacy is one of them, because at the very bare minimum, your provider is going to have a lot of the info about the way that you use their product, and depending on the product's design, how you end up using the underlying technologies, such as Lightning itself.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. Anytime you're trusting anybody to keep your information a secret, that's, that's not necessarily good privacy.
I think a really important thing here that often gets missed is people can have the best intentions. People can really be thinking of it from like, no, we're going to maintain user privacy. We're going to maintain privacy on the network. And if the systems that are being used allow people to take advantage of that and destroy privacy, we have to basically be aware that is likely to eventually happen, right? Whether we're talking about these, aggregated KYC systems or custodial Lightning wallets, it's not about the intentions of the people. People love to say like, oh no, but they're a good actor, like they're only going to do what's best for us. It's not about that. It's about what can be taken advantage of, what somebody can be pressed to do if they're threatened with a subpoena or jail time, or
Yeah.
if a hacker gets involved.
Yeah, that's the key right there. It's the subpoena thing. Like a lot of the things that we talk about at Start9 is like, are we subpoena proof? Or like, sorry, are our customer, obviously we're not. Are our customers immune to subpoenas that we might be served with? Because while our customers can, get on run all of their nodes off of Tor, they can set this thing up without permission. We sell, products to them, but we otherwise don't know who they are. The question is like Start9 itself, like we have a business address in somewhere, right? And our business is run at the kind of at the permission of whatever government structure that you have. And so if you are operating in such a way that you are retaining some of that information, even if you are perfect 100%, right? Even if you genuinely are a good actor, even if you resist any sort of monetary incentives that you might have to corrupt that point of view, the question is that at the end of the day, are you going to go to jail over it? And it's just better not to have the data at that point.
Yeah, and it's more than just if you get subpoenaed or go to jail. Are you willing as a company or as an individual to go to jail over it? It's anytime you have these centralized systems, they become really attractive targets for people to exploit, take advantage of, and hack, and basically sell that information on the dark web. And so it's more than just what your legal exposure is. It's, are you collecting information that basically puts your customers or your users at a disadvantage if you were to be compromised?
I heard this fantastic phrase at this privacy conference, and it was a whole presentation on data is the new oil, because all the corporations
wait, we lost you for a second. You said data is the new
oil. All the big corporations want all the oil, all the data that they can, but as we saw in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, I mean that data leaks and it can really blow up in your face. So I appreciate that what Keegan was saying about being subpoena proof. That'll be a big takeaway for me.
There are custodial models where the custodial institution doesn't know information about its customers or about their payments. So David Chaum was famous for this, and he started DigiCash, this Chaumian banks in the 90s. He didn't know who his customers were; they were anonymous accounts. He didn't know who was making payments in his bank, but he was able to facilitate incoming payments to members of his bank and external payments from members of his bank to others outside his bank, as well as internal transfers, all in a privacy-focused manner. And one benefit of those models that you don't achieve when everyone self-hosts is that there's a greater anonymity set you get when you're part of a large group of people who are all, from an external observer's perspective, they're all the same entity, they're all the same institutions sending out those payments. Because then if we do, if you are trying to do chain analysis or network analysis for Lightning to figure out where the payments are, who the payments are coming from, you have a pretty big anonymity set there. You can say, well, I know it's a member of this bank, but that bank has 50 members, and I don't know what, not even the bank knows who made that payment within their members.
From a private perspective, that's true. But the trade-off that you make there is that the larger the custodian is, the more probable that they can be put under pressure for various forms of censorship. Now, I think your point being is that even if the institution itself doesn't know who their customers are, it might be very difficult to selectively censor things. But it's not impossible at all for some like a regulatory structure to come in and say, well, okay, you have to undo this design, or you have to stop servicing your customers. And in that sense, then, even if you're not selectively censoring, if you're essentially denying service to all of your customers because you choose not to comply with one of these orders, then you're like any of those customers could experience a form of censorship by their institution getting shut down in ways that if they were self-hosting, they are not exposed to that particular risk.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And one of the difficulties of starting any centralized service is once you have customers, it's very hard to keep yourself anonymous. But if you can manage to do that, if you can have a wide customer base and no one knows who you are, you can get away with doing that stuff for a very long time. See the Silk Road as an example. So I think that I would like to see more examples of anonymous banking, of anonymous Bitcoin banking, where the bank doesn't know who its customers are, the feds don't know who runs the bank, and that would be great. At least I think it would be great. I'd love to see more development in that direction.
What's the use case for a third-party Bitcoin bank when you can be your own bank on Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, one is greater anonymity sets. That you can achieve greater anonymity sets for cheaper if you are part of if all of the members of the bank are sharing the same UTX sets.
It's like a custodial coin join kind of, with like time delays on it.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to that, or mixers are like this, except they're usually, an ideal mixer is what I'm kind of describing, where everybody in the mix has the same UTXOs, they can withdraw them at any time, and ideally, nobody knows who owns or operates the mixer.
To me, that just sounds like a shittier mix. Like, we could keep our fun. You can keep mixing, you can keep mixing and mixing and mixing if you want, and get out whenever you want, and without trusting anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. It's my understanding that custodial mixers are cheaper as well than pin joins.
Your microphone is not the most clear microphone that I've heard today, by the way.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of fighting the good fight from inside of like an Atlas missile silo or underwater or something.
Me?
Yeah.
I'll change my mic.
Do it.
While you're changing your mic, I'm going to ask Alex the question that I asked earlier that you also said you had an answer to, but Mr. Bosworth, question. I know that with zero invoices, in other words, full invoices that you can send any amount of money to arbitrarily, there was the issue of since you didn't know how much money you were receiving, you didn't know if the node or any of the peers along the route took some of that money, and then you ignorantly, accepted it and gave the pre-image and let everybody have the funds. With Keysend, how is this not a problem anymore? How is that problem solved with Keysend?
Well, the problem was also addressed with the addition of the payment nonces. So when you create an invoice now, it generates not just the payment pre-image, but it also generates another random number. And that random number is added into the payment request, that big long string that you give to people. And then when you make a payment, you take that random number and you include it in the Onion blob. You encrypt it to the destination. And the destination, when they unpeel the onion, they check the veracity of that number and they say, does this match what I gave you in the payment request? And if it doesn't match, then they're going to reject the payment. So there is a way to kind of deal with this using this new feature. So that's kind of one way that kind of HTLC sniping can be eliminated. Is that if you're the last hop in the route, then you try to give that the same hash and try to get that pre-image for cheaper than you should. You're not going to be able to know what that encrypted value is. So the receiver is going to know you're fibbing. In KeySend, just the premise doesn't work for similar reasons. So when you send some money, the actual pre-image is not even known to the recipient. So remember, the onion is encrypted. So when you send that, if you tried to stop the forward and extend an HTLC with the same hash, I'm sorry, it's kind of technical. If you try to extend the HTLC with the same hash, the receiver doesn't even know the pre-image because the pre-image is encrypted in that package. So it would be impossible for them to even take the payment.
Awesome, thanks. And I didn't know about the nonce. That's seems like an obvious thing that wasn't there before in hindsight. I don't know. That seems like really helpful.
Yeah, that's now that's been enforced in LND for a while now. So it kind of just like a silent upgrade that's already live for a long time on the Lightning Network.
And a long time means like what, 6 months or a year?
Yeah, I mean it depends on how fast you've been updating, but yeah, like 6 months at least.
Awesome, thank you.
Alex, what are the things that you're personally most excited about? I feel like I have a hard time sort of like reading the things that you are that for you feel like the most sort of urgent or important, or the things that you want, that you're interested in having more people know about.
Well, something that I think is interesting is the ability for people to offer services other than routing on their nodes. And we already have kind of like, if you run a Bitcoin node, then you offer, and you run an archival node, then you're offering services like you can download the rest of the blockchain. Mm-hmm. If you run a Lightning node, even the basic Lightning node with no capital on it, you're still helping the network by synchronizing the data about which nodes are there, which channels are there. And then if you add capital, now you can add a new service. You can say, I'm helping you move payments through the network. So that's like always been what's excited me a lot about Bitcoin, is that we have the ability to create these kind of decentralized services that everybody can take part in. Everybody can just set up a node and start kind of engaging in commerce with everybody else. You're like working together, and then you can use that money to kind of figure out where resources need to be. So like with a Lightning Network, we have the ability to use the routing fees to say there should be more capital here and less capital there. And I think we can apply that kind of same logic to all kinds of different APIs.
Interesting. You and I were talking at one point about your desire to build out interesting or kind of additional functions on top of KeySend. I mean, one of the things.
So we were even like you were saying before about the privacy aspect. So one of the services that I built that runs on my node is called Relay. And so if you give me a payment request, so like if you're receiving funds on your node, you can give me that payment request, and then I'll generate a mirror payment request that's keyed off of the same hash. And then I don't know the pre-image, so I can't take the money. You can give out my generated payment request to anybody. So then it looks like they're paying me, but I know that in order for me to get the pre-image, I have to pay you. So now you've kind of gotten rid of that problem of, oh, I had to tell this service about my UTXOs, because instead you say, oh, I have to tell Alex about my UTXOs. You can kind of chain those if you want in a link, and that can be something that that's not like a solution at the protocol level, but that's like a solution at the application level, where it's like I can notice a problem that people have and I can solve it. And that also works completely over Keysend. So all the communication, I don't have to run a Tor server. I don't have to set up like an API server. When somebody wants to use this service, they just key send me the details about the payment request, and I key send them back, or I pay them back using TLV with the details about, okay, here's how it's going to work.
I think that's so interesting. I mean, one of the things that I really love about the stuff that you built out is not only have you built out the libraries and the NPM modules such that they are extremely modular, right? Like all the functionality that is used by Balance of Satoshis, which is of course the tool that you've built out that allows one to, from the command line, it's an abstraction layer on top of a lot of the LNCLI functionality, and adds more even there. But I have been continually impressed by your kind of response to some of the challenges that that have come up within the Lightning Network or on the Lightning Network. I think there's a lot of kind of, I wouldn't even call it FUD, but it's just it's still early, and I really appreciate that you're kind of diving in and creating these kind of novel solutions to these problems, which ideally will be implemented at a protocol level in the future, but in the meantime solve these needs very effectively. I mean, the most clear example of that for me is the dual funded channel function process that you have built out, that it is trustless. It does not require, like in Plebnet, we initially we were kind of at this point where we were like, all right, so we're doing these ghetto submarine swaps. So you're going to open a channel, and then somebody's going to send you a Lightning invoice, and then you're going to send them back the funds on chain. And it was really interesting for me to learn that like the vast majority of people had not even used the Balance of Satoshi's command line tool to do the key send based dual funded channel opens that you built out. And I think that's I don't know, I think it's really cool that you're solving these problems in kind of a novel way using the tools that are available to us right now.
Well, I like that complicated problems will be solved at the app level rather than the protocol level, because we're dealing with things like free markets. We're dealing with things where people have like obscure requirements that are just personal to them. So I'm actually working on like an upgrade to that whole flow that works very differently. But the ability to innovate with applications, I think is not something that we can ever say should stop and should just be, everything should be defined in a protocol somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we need to be super adaptable at that application level of like, okay, today people really want this, just like the groups. Like people want to create these channel groups. Nobody foresaw that, and people started creating applications for those groups.
Wait, sorry. Can you define channel groups? You mean like sort of like Ring of Fire stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, people had it in their mind that the way I want to join Lightning Network, the way I want to interact with the Lightning Network is I want to join in these groups. That wasn't in the Lightning paper. That wasn't in any protocol. It's just kind of like a desire people have of how they want to join. So, and that might go away. So, there's no specific reasoning behind why you have to join in a group. It's just something that's what people feel comfortable with. That's what works for people. It's what works, with the way that they want to deploy their capital. And so, like I want to see apps that kind of address those needs, like as they happen. And then if people don't want to do that anymore, that's fine. Those apps, are not used anymore, or they evolve to be what people want.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think is so interesting is like, to me, like humans are incredibly social. We've evolved to be these social animals, right? We build communities. We have these we rely on the strengths of our social connections in order to succeed, and we have for forever. And so to me, like, it seems like a things like the Ring of Fire community, Plebnet, the stuff that's happening in El Salvador, I think that's going to be the way that not only Bitcoin kind of drives forward, but also the Lightning Network. I think, and it's been really exciting to see the tools that are being developed right now. The stuff that the lnrouter.app and LN Node Insight, those kinds of tools. I think we're just going to continue going in that direction, which is to say, those kinds of tools, but kind of permutations that allow us to build those, to use them in a community sense. So having a group of people or a community that are using Lightning to transact and to settle obligations, and then from there those communities will then expand and want to connect to larger communities and other communities that are in the network. I think that's the future of Lightning, and I've seen this happening both like with Plebnet, of course, right? Like I have had a Lightning node for a long time, but I only had like a couple channels and wasn't particularly interested until JC and D++ and all these other people, Rich Winder and KP, they kind of like, we were able to kind of, and Marshall, we kind of got together and created this group of this community of people that were trusted, but that we were all kind of learning together. I think that's going to happen over and over and over again, and it's already happening. Like there's a group on Clubhouse that Lamar has built out really amazingly. It's called the Black Bitcoin Billionaires Club, and they're already spinning up their own Lightning community, and then they're kind of connecting to Plebnet and they're connecting to the larger network. I think that's a really interesting. And I know you and I have talked about this in the Balance of Satoshi's chat, but I think that tools that support kind of figuring out how one's community exists within the larger Lightning network, and then also tools that support sort of creating these group kind of channel opens are going to be really, really powerful as we move forward.
Hey P, how's it going? I wanted to make a comment about this assertion that Alex made about how the difference, I think, between like protocol development and app development. I just wanted to kind of point out that like when you make that distinction, I think that's like a false equivalent or a false distinction, really, because even at the application layer, the kind of work that Boz has done with his Balance of Satoshi, the dual funded like protocol that he's written there, that's really still a protocol. Like when you get down to it, a protocol is like writing out kind of canned conversations that two peers are going to have. And whether or not that's like in layers of different, like whether you're layering how you're talking to each other or not, excuse me, the at the end of the day, you're still like coming up with a way that two parties are going to programmatically achieve a task or a goal. So whether you're doing that through like LNURL, I think is like a good example of a protocol that you had to get adopted and have a bunch of different people able to understand that protocol that you've written in order for that application or whatever you want to call it to be successful. Anyways, I don't think it's super useful to try and make this like distinction that there's protocols and then there's applications, because at the end of the day, in order for applications to all understand each other, like there will be a common protocol that they're all speaking. So whether and at what level, like what layer we're allowing ourselves to innovate there, I think that's definitely a good question. I know like the work we're doing on C Lightning, we tend to be, we see the spec process and the protocol that is encoded in the spec to be not quite finished yet and like open to modifications such that we can bring new features that we've seen people in the community kind of want and desire, and able to bring that back into the common definition of the protocol that is Lightning, that Lightning nodes can talk and understand each other at. But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to like point that out. Sorry.
I think it's just a question of like how heavy or light each protocol is and whether or not they can be taken piecemeal or not, right? I think the aversion to trying to put it in like the bolts is this perception. I actually don't think, the more I read the bolts, the more I realize that this is not true. But there's this perception that they're like one monolithic spec, and that in order to have a Lightning implementation at all, you have to sort of comply with all of it. And I think to the degree that we can make that more clear, the way the BIP repository kind of works, and I think that something was recently proposed called the blips, which I think that they offer a little bit more of a nuanced perspective, the way that you were just talking about, Nifty, which is that these protocols can be taken piecemeal. They don't have to be taken kind of wholesale.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, the point I'm really trying to make is that when you're developing something such that you want applications to be able to talk to each other, that is protocol work. And at some point, you're going to have adoption of your protocols. So for the work that Alex has been doing, that literally means that if people want to use the stuff that he's developed, they have to install and run the Boz software that he's written, right? So like that's because like why is that? That's because he's taught it to speak a protocol, and if you want everyone to be able to like if you at that level, then it's like interoperability, right? If you want to be able to interoperate with that software, then you either need to be running the same thing, so you need to get everyone to adopt the same software that you've written, which means it needs to work across like everyone that might want to use it. Or at some level, that means you need to write it down in a repeatable way such that other people can integrate in with your software, right? So I think, yeah, what you're saying about the bolts is there's like a lot of different processes and parts of there's like a lot of different conversations, I should say, that Lightning nodes have. And the nice thing about the spec is that, yeah, they've all been written down and documented in a way that's repeatable. And that's really what the spec process is about, right? Is providing this repeatable platform that makes a common playing field such that the Lightning Network benefits from the network effects. I mean, it is called a network, right? So you can get network effects, which means that people running different software written by different teams is still able to interact and like have kind of a common foundation. Anyways.
I guess where do you see it sounds like there's like a bit of like conflict between Alex's approach and maybe your own. And I don't fully understand it. Like what is it sounds like if you have the primitives in place that can be built upon.
Well, I mean, so like, if we want to go,
Good.
like, I think dual funding is probably the easiest thing to compare contrast. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I haven't looked super in depth into the process that Alex has developed for the Boz stuff, but I know the process that's been proposed and implemented in C Lightning for the spec adoption pretty well.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, at least and it sounds like again, like Alex is working on updating it, but currently it looks like you have to make 3 transactions in order to open a channel. So there's like a real cost to that, both in the amount of fees that someone who's participating in that open wants to contribute, like, you know, on-chain fees go up, so it's a more expensive way of doing it. And additionally, that's more transactions on chain, right? And the whole point of Lightning, in theory, is to reduce the total on chain footprint of the number of transactions, reduce the on chain footprint of interacting with Bitcoin. So by going to the level of the spec process, we're able to make it such that it's still one transaction, and it's not just one transaction. It also enables coin joins between a bunch of different parties. It also doesn't really rely on like interactivity. So I mean, there's definitely, I think, some benefits to being a little more able to, not able, but willing to like, okay, let's start from scratch and figure out how would we do this, like
Let's
from
implement it at a protocol level.
yeah, at the protocol level, right? So
If
Yeah,
I
I
could
guess
try to
I guess
defend the alternative perspective
wait,
for a second, though.
can I just jump in and then go for it? I just want to say I think I don't see those two approaches as being in conflict. I think that what Alex is doing is basically like, hey, like here are the tools we have right now. Let's implement, like my understanding of kind of Alex's approach was like, hey, it seems like a problem that these, you know, these kind of again, what we in PlebNet we call like the sort of think, for lack of a better term, ghetto submarine swaps, like that is a trustful process. And I think like Alex implemented the kind of, again, like the multi-transaction, you know, the UX is challenging. Like we all kind of had to learn it. And again, Alex is really great about sort of like offering like real-time support on that. But I think that's just basically seeing a need in the short term and then building a system based on the existing tools to solve that
yeah,
problem. And I think what you're doing is basically you're recognizing like, hey, this is something we should be able to do in an even more efficient way.
yeah,
And
but
then
I want
working
to
to,
push back on your timeline there, right? Like the dual funding project's been in process for like a couple of years now. The team that Alex works on, like it hasn't been, I guess I'm trying to say, like it hasn't been a surprise that this would be something people want to do. It's definitely been something that at least I've been working on Sea Lightning for quite a
mm,
while now. It seems that if like there's nothing stopping like the L&D team from participating in that spec process and implementing the spec to make it happen at the protocol level. It just seems that there's a I feel like a little bit of an ideological opinion about what's available and open for change. Like at what level are we as a community working to make updates?
mm. I mean, I
So
guess
I
I
mean,
don't.
so
Go ahead.
here's the thing, though, right? Like, I can't necessarily talk so much about the dual funding issue in particular, but I think the value of not going spec first is that for every like 5 use cases you can think of that is that you can get benefits from building something at a deeper protocol level, that like, you know, maybe only a few of, maybe most of them are transient, maybe only a few of them end up being sort of permanent fixtures of like, oh, this is the real way we want to do things. And so the value of testing out some of those things early allows you to be able to very cheaply figure out which one any individual use case is. And so with hindsight and history being 2020, we might know that dual funding is clearly something that we wanted, you know, for a while, and that there's, you know, a significantly better way to do it if we go through the way the work that, you know, this you guys at the Sea Lightning team have done. But like, I wonder about all of the alternative scenarios where it's where either dual funding happened to not be one of those things, or, you know, all of the other features that you might want that you realize maybe there's, you know, this is just a transient problem, and then doing the what I perceive to be much heavier work at the spec level may just not be worth it, given how long that problem ends up lasting, at least in the interactivity of the way that people actually use the Lightning Network.
One example of this might be KeySend, right? That's still not spec, but now it's kind of the base for a whole bunch of applications. And it seems that not every protocol is using KeySend, and consequently it's not on by default.
LNURL, I think, is a very good example. Every wallet is kind of expected to have it. There's lots of its own standards there. And it's not at all part of the protocol. And you wouldn't necessarily want it to be, because it's big and it makes certain compromises that, you know, normal Lightning wouldn't make.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Lisa, is that I think, like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't view like the stuff that Alex has built out in Balance of Satoshis as being like an opinion or an approach that is like endorsed by Lightning Labs. I think of that as being, and maybe I'm totally wrong here, and I don't actually know the history, but it seems like that's something that's been built out by Alex specifically because of his own kind of desire to have this functionality. I'm not sure what the official like
Yeah,
LND
that's
or
right.
Lightning Labs position is.
There's no link between any software that I write on the balance on my own scripts that I run to manage my own nodes, and it's not there's no team of developers working on that at Lightning Labs. It's just what I see. If I see a problem, if I have a problem myself, I write it, and then I believe in open source. So if something that I write can help somebody else do something, and that's something that I do see. So I publish this code. I think I published all the code that I've written for many years, and I start to notice, okay, well, this is being used in El Salvador, and this is being used by companies who are private, and they're just trying to use it internally. But like this is being used by people as documentation to figure out how to interact with Lightning Network. So I'm approaching things at that app level where it's like I'm trying to just make this stuff work. I'm just trying to run my routing node. I'm just trying to stop people from losing money. With solutions that I can implement right away. I don't get any sign off on anything like that. It's not a Lightning Labs product, and it's totally separated from L&D.
Yeah, but I think if you go to the point of saying like you built it because you're building it because it's tools that people need, it seems like at what point then do you start championing those things being included in the Lightning Spec protocol, such that, as I was saying earlier, people don't have to download the Balance of Satoshis to get access to those kinds of tools.
That's definitely on purpose. I mean, so I think the way that you characterized the protocol itself was incorrect, but you admitted yourself that you didn't know how it worked. That's not something that I wanted other people to adopt, and I think that's the difference between protocol and application. So Twitter, like that we're using now, maybe it runs on the World Wide Web. World Wide Web is a protocol. That's what everybody adheres to, and then there is a protocol between like our Twitter apps and our Twitter websites and the Twitter servers, but that's a protocol that's internal to them, and that's not something that they're trying to get everybody to adopt. So that's what I'd say is the difference. At the app level, you can kind of explore different needs. You can explore the market, what problems people have, and when you get to the protocol level, I mean, there's space for both. At the protocol level, you're trying to solve problems for the world. You're trying to create global standards. So I definitely support both of those approaches.
I actually got to run, guys, but it's been a great conversation. I'll see you later.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Keegan.
Hi, Keegan.
Yeah, well put. I'm curious how it plays out. Yeah, I do want to see people free to innovate. And at what point does it become common infrastructure, and what role do application developers have to change their applications into protocols so that it could be more interoperable and the open network as a whole could win out.
Well, I think the open network as a whole wins out regardless, right? I think that the different approaches to solving this problem ultimately allow us to grow and figure out what the best solution is. So I don't think it's a question of one versus the other. I think it's just trying to figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I might be far on the other end because AIMBOSS is closed source, and while it is useful, I don't feel the need to make it open source, since my objectives are business. But
I mean, look, in a private conversation, you said that you were keeping it closed source because you hate America. Is that accurate?
that was a private conversation.
No, totally kidding, obviously. Um,
But I think that makes kind of an interesting point about like how open is open source, right? Like, I mean, clearly there's like closed source software, which is like projects such as Amboss that are like in the dark and no one knows what they are. And then there's projects that are like open source, that are like, like I don't even know what, maybe like LNTX bot. I think that's open source, I'm guessing here. But like, there's like open source software that kind of doesn't pretend or aspire to be anything other than a piece of software and tools that you can download and like utilize, right? Or like look at the source code and learn how they're written, that sort of thing. And then I think there's like kind of this thing that like you start getting to like protocol and like spec level, the specification level kind of work where it's like we're not just writing open source that anyone can come and look at. We're writing recipes for how these things are going to interact, and we're documenting exactly like how they work such that like multiple pieces of like an open source like community, I guess I should say, can like form around that. And then you have like multiple implementations and stuff. I don't know. It's like, Lightning's like, I'm sure there's like other things, probably like HTTP and like the web protocol stack are probably like the best analogy to kind of what Lightning is attempting to do, which is kind of interesting that like the other analogy is you can't make is Bitcoin, right? Like to me, it's really interesting that Bitcoin isn't isn't specced the same way and to the same like level of granularity that Lightning is. I think that's like a really interesting thing to like be cognizant of when we're talking about like the spec process that Lightning goes through versus the spec process that the BIPs and Bitcoin go through. And that's because like at the end of the day, the consensus level software that is Bitcoin for the most part is like to large extent is like what Bitcoin Core is, right? Like there's large swaths of consensus critical like code pathways in Bitcoin Core, like this is my understanding, that aren't spec'd anywhere. And there aren't really like there are other implementations of Bitcoin, of like the Bitcoin Core stuff, but most people don't run them because there's no way to like verify that all these consensus critical paths are like interoperable, or like there's like no spec to like check it back against, so to speak, or make sure that they're all speaking the same language. Anyways, yeah, so I just like I'm sorry, I'm like sort of rambling at this point, but I just think it's like really interesting though that like when you start getting into like this grander theme of like what exactly it means to be like open source and where does like the spec process fall in that is like I don't know, it's just like kind of interesting to like compare and contrast the two. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging, right? I mean, I think I don't actually know what Justifer's like, whether Justifer has I'm assuming he has an alternative source of income, but I think when one is paid by a larger company to kind of be developing things that allows one freedom to kind of develop these open source projects, I think that is a different situation than someone who is like trying to develop a separate system and is paying server costs and things like that as some others are. So I know that in my own projects and endeavors and education, like I can afford to take certain risks in terms of the things that I build out as open source versus closed source, because that's not my primary, that's not something I need to rely on as like a thing that I'm like, quote unquote, like fairly compensated for. So I'm not sure. And I don't know that anybody else is in that situation, but I think about that a lot.
I think we've basically covered like almost like 4 different ways to change the shape of Lightning. We've got Nifty with the protocol advocacy. We've got Alex Bosworth, who's like just pumping out applications. I'm trying to, build a business on this thing. And then we've discussed at length, Renee Picard's basic like campaign to change, some of people's settings across the network. Like 4 completely different approaches, to this problem to make this whole system work.
Nifty, can I? You're in a unique position here because you work for Blockstream to answer some questions that I personally have, and I think other people may have about Blockstream Green, or not Blockstream Green, but about Greenlight, the new node offering. Would you be comfortable asking a couple questions that I personally have about that project?
Yeah, so honestly, I have been a little bit of arm's length from it. I will
Sorry, I
answer
got
as much as I
disconnected. I'm
can.
assuming everybody else heard everything that Jennifer was saying just now.
Yeah, welcome back, P.
I'm back too.
But yeah, I'd be happy to answer whatever questions that you do have.
Sure. Yeah. One of them was about the availability of it. So when a lot of the press announcements and the press release said like we're launching this and we're rolling it out, and so I was like, oh, this sounds awesome. I can spin up a node basically in the cloud, but I still have the private keys. I want to go play with this. So I went to the website to look for a download section, or if not download, like click a button to deploy or whatever. And what I found was like a message that was like, if you're a corporation that's interested in using this as part of your infrastructure, please contact us. And it was like, wait, this isn't for plebs to play with? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, man, I know that like there was like at some point internally, someone shared a website that was basically, I'm gonna get this wrong, as like a copy of basically it would let you spin up a Lightning node in your browser, in the browser. I don't exactly know how it works. So I've definitely seen something that does what I would assume is like what you're looking for, kind of like a GUI where you like click a button and it spins up a node. But I think the answer to your question about like wanting, and I'm sort of imagining like kind of like Google Cloud provider, I think the GCP has like kind of a dashboard where you can like spin up nodes, or like AWS, you can like pick nodes and like spin them up and like see them. I think the answer is that we don't have like I think that eventually at some point that's definitely something we want to let people be able to do, but it's so early right now. We don't even have like those levels of dashboards built that would make it possible for you to do what I'm guessing you want your experience to be like.
Cool. Yeah. If there are if you guys are still building out the infrastructure to support, or perhaps I misinterpreted it. My impression was that what it is for is so that you can deploy a node and in the cloud without giving it your public, or without giving it your private keys, so that any transactions you want to make, you still have the private keys to sign or disapprove of those. But all of the backend stuff, all of the hard things that go into channel management and node running and chain synchronization and graph synchronization are all handled by this cloud infrastructure. Or at least that was my impression of what Greenlight was for. But maybe I misinterpreted it, or what are your thoughts? What's your take on what it's for?
I think that's correct.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that Vivek? Go ahead, Vivek.
That's correct. I think right now we're trying to nail down, I guess, the offering itself, as in like how it's going to work. That's why we've partnered with Striga, previously known as Lastbit, and Sphinx to really nail down the experience, and then perhaps open it up to the masses. We don't want to just kind of throw it out there in the wild already. So yeah, TBD. Appreciate the enthusiasm. Sorry you went to the website and it wasn't quite what you were expecting yet.
Yeah, no problem. And I apologize, Vivek. I didn't know you worked for Blockstream. I thought Nifty was the only one in this chat who did that. Um, I also wondered if you guys could compare it to the way, if you know anything about the way Electrum did their Lightning implementation. I recall some of the narrative around that being that their Electrum servers would handle a lot of the difficult stuff that goes into running a node, including watchtowers. Like the Electrum personal server, or the Electrum's X server now, I believe, has a Lightning watchtower built in, so that users of the Electrum Lightning implementation don't have to run one, and instead they can rely on the the servers to do that. So I don't. That's about all I know about. But that impression jumped to my mind when I read the press release about Greenlight. I was like, oh, that's kind of like what Electrum was doing, where they're letting their servers do the hard stuff, and then your client can do the easy stuff about running a node. Do you know anything more about that, or if that played into any of your conversation at all?
I just want to jump in really quick. Does Geestlight sound like Ultron to anyone else? Like the sort of like going back and forth between being like a compassionate human and also like a super deep voiced robot?
So one thing that I want to say is I've been struggling with the Twitter Space demons this entire time, and this is like the first time I can hear everyone clearly. So, so like he sounds good to me, but like this is like the first time where everyone sounds good to me. P. So I don't know. If you're the one struggling now, I think at least one person on stage has to struggle. So why don't you just take the cross for a little bit? Because I'm enjoying this now, and I also had a question.
I want to be clear. It sounds
Yeah.
amazing. I feel intimidated by the kind of like the deep
No, he
bass
sounds
that is
normal.
coming from. Okay, that's just me then. Well, I also just want to say that Vivek, Lisa, you know, I reached out to you, Vivek, and asked for sort of early access to Greenlight, and I just want to let you know that I do feel kind of personally attacked that you haven't been able to give me access to it yet, along with you know, so please you know, do what you can to speed that along.
This is quite a way to cut the line, P. But sure, you know.
No. I'm just fucking with you. Yeah, do your thing. But I am super excited about it. I think it's a really
Wait,
important.
okay, yeah. So I want to just like quick question to y'all who are so excited about Greenlight, which is awesome, but also like why, like I guess like what is your like yeah, I just want to hear like your use case. So like clearly with like I guess Strega and Sphinx Chat, like they have like kind of a use case in an app like that they're trying to scale with like a bunch of users on Lightning, and so like for them, you know, they're really great. Greenlight, their use of Greenlight is like pretty understandable, I think, but like for like y'all are like more I'm guessing small scale, and like total apologies if you're not.
How dare
But
you.
yeah, I'd love to hear more about like what you want to use Greenlight for.
Lisa, I'm offended, and again, once again, I feel attacked. No, but the answer is that you know, I run a couple physical Lightning nodes, and you know, running a couple, you know, LND and Eclair and C Lightning, and I'm really excited about the idea of people who are interested in Lightning being able to spin up Lightning nodes without having to concern themselves with the complication of building their own physical hardware and their internet connection and all of the associated the problems that are I should say the barriers to entry that are potentially there. I think that running your own physical hardware is super important from a decentralization perspective, but I think that tools like Greenlight and you know, Michael Tidwell, who it sounds like has for the first time been able to join us on the stage and actually hear what's
Yes.
going on, is building a set of Terraform. You told me this a second ago, Michael. I apologize.
Yeah, so like the idea
Terraform BrainJacks, Terraform programs that you install directly into your brain via the computer chip that was put there by Bill Gates. Is that fair?
that was almost a perfect explanation. Terraform modules that
Modules.
any well, the idea is if you don't want to run it in Kubernetes, if you want something that's a little bit more VM based, this is what I'm aiming for people that want to deploy their stuff in a more VM stateful kind of way, and less
Yeah, yeah.
Kubernetes way.
So again, it's the kind of the computer chip that was put in your brain, you know, by Bill Gates when the 5G turned on. That's going to allow you to run the Terraform modules. And again, in case you don't know my sense of humor, I am totally joking. These are super important systems that are being built out. But to answer your question, Lisa, I think that being able to virtualize a Lightning node while still maintaining custody of your own keys is a really, really powerful educational and teaching tool. And it allows people to basically explore that, you know, what it is to running a Lightning node, what it means to be able to route payments, how to manage your channels and balance them without having to deal with all of the level of commitment that is required to buy a bunch of hardware that you may or may not feel comfortable with, and then set it up, and then invest, you know, and then kind of do all that stuff. I think it's really cool. I hope that will lead to people, you know. Also, I will say, I think that the cost, I don't know what the cost structure is planned to be for Greenlight, but I think the idea of being able to run a node for, you know, tens of dollars versus having to, a Lightning node that is, versus having to commit to, you know, $250, $350 in one, you know, kind of pass. That's a way more approachable thing for most people to be able to be like, well, you know, I can fuck around with this for, you know, $10 to $15 or less or whatever it is, and then kind of figure out if I actually want to run a Lightning node. That's a compelling idea for me.
Yeah, and I think one cool thing about Greenlight that makes that I think even cooler is that my understanding is that the eventual goal is that you would be able to migrate. So, you know, you could start out with a node on Greenlight and then migrate it to like your own infrastructure later because, you know, you do own the keys. And I think there's a way to make it exportable. I'd have to like check again with what Christian's done, but I know that's definitely a thing that he wants to do and is working towards making possible. So cool. Okay, so we've heard from P that he wants Greenlight to help onboard and like give more people access to Lightning in like a super lightweight way. I don't think we heard from the other person who originally asked the question yet.
Yeah, one of the projects that I frequently help out with is LNbits, which is among other things, it is a plugin infrastructure for Lightning nodes, and it allows anyone to create it has a bunch of plugins that you can use to make your node do all sorts of cool tricks. And in the support channel for that, one of the common difficulties people have, or a reason that puts them off from trying it out, is spinning up a node. They're like, it takes too long, or it's too complicated, or it's hard to do. And what we would really like, I mean, LNbits is designed to support a bunch of different backends. You can use C-Lightning, you can use LND as a backend, you can use LNTXBot or LNPay or OpenNode or a couple of other ones. But what we'd really like is to have a funding method that's just a button. You click a button and there's your funding method, you know, but also non-custodial. And that seems like one promising avenue toward that is this Greenlight thing, or at least they make it sound like it's a one-click deployment. And so we'd love to create an extension or something for LNbits where to set it up, you just click a button and now you've got your node backend, and they'll take care of all the hard stuff and let your LNbits just do the fun stuff. So that's where I'm coming from in looking forward to seeing something like this come to fruition.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
My question is Greenlight going to be better supported than Green Wallet?
Ooh, sick burn.
Just kidding.
Vivek.
Just kidding.
Vivek,
Just
do you
kidding.
want to take that one?
I also
Terraform
someone
these
at
nuts.
Blockstream.
All right, continue. Someone at Blockstream.
Someone at Blockstream obviously loves the color green. That's all I gotta say about that.
I wonder if they're
all
like
right. So,
colorblind and all they can see is green, and that's kind of the deep-seated
Well, Green
incentive
Wallet,
structure.
originally was Green Address, started by Lawrence Nahum, and it was acquired by Blockstream. So
That
yes,
sounds like some
you
bullshit.
can.
I was just throwing shade.
No, I'm saying
I
like if you were guessing someone really likes green, then it might be Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, okay, like not to like give away too much here, but I feel like the name kind of explains like what the eventual or like what kind of the origin story of Greenlight is and like where that might be going as a product at some point, if that makes sense, or like kind of the ambitions for that in the long term. I don't know. Maybe that's like too abstract of a hint. That's why it's
foreshadowing. Foreshadowing for us.
Dun,
I
dun,
love
Again,
it.
what I'm
Yeah.
taking away from this, Lisa, is the
Dark.
5G is going to put green light directly into our brains, and we need to protect the children. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, you should all definitely be sleeping in Faraday cages if you aren't already. I don't know.
I mean, I obviously am. I sleep in a chicken wire mesh that I custom built that covers my entire body. I only get about an hour and a half of sleep a night because it's really uncomfortable and it is electrified. But we all make sacrifices.
The only problem is the Faraday cage. If you already have the signals in there, they just bounce around and zap you all night. So that's probably why you're not getting the right amount of sleep.
No, it's the current. I got to figure it out. Right now, whenever my body touches the edges of the cage, I get electrocuted and it wakes me up. But moving on to more important topics.
Like,
Uh,
P,
I
that
wanted
sounds like
to
a
say-
you problem, man. That really sounds like a you problem.
Hey P, before you jump to another topic, there's something that Lisa brought up earlier that my shit wasn't working earlier, so I didn't want to drop it too far away. If you don't mind, if I could follow up on something previous that we've talked about real quick.
I'll allow it, but know that if this topic does not bear fruit, I will hold you accountable.
Sure. Yeah, we can. If this isn't something we want to talk about, we can skip to the next topic. But Lisa, I feel like you. Oh yeah. The problem is I swear to God, I could only hear like every third word, and it was terrible. But I kind of was making out what you were talking about with Alex earlier, and it was a kind of interesting back and forth you both were having. I wanted to maybe just ask a quick follow-up question, which was, I feel like Lisa brings up a pretty valid criticism or point, which is I feel like L&D right now, and I'm not saying you were saying this, Lisa. This is just kind of like what I was putting together in my head. But I feel like L&D right now is essentially the reference implementation of Lightning, whether you like it or not. And with that being said, anything that L&D does that's pretty, interesting or drastic is going to more or less be part of not maybe the official protocol, but this protocol that abstract higher level, application protocol that people are actually using day to day. And I mean, I think one of these things, and I would love to be schooled on this if someone wants to dunk on me after this, but is like the boss score, which started out completely, with Alex, not related to anything that L&D was kind of supporting natively, or Lightning Labs was supporting, but now is like something that people are really, really focused on with their nodes, is getting like a high, a Lightning terminal score and stuff like this. And it's almost like essentially becoming part of the protocol, I feel. And I would love for someone to dunk on me and tell me why I'm wrong about this, but I feel like this could, as like maybe these scores are maybe important and very useful, to be honest. And then also, allow for these application layers and stuff to be useful as well, almost like a liaison kind of thing. I feel like there could also be like potentially a slippery slope where something is introduced and now it's like disenfranchises the other implementations. I don't know if that sparks any conversation, but between what you guys were talking about, but those are the things I was thinking of.
I mean, yeah, I think like to some extent the spec is only as good as like the work that we as implementation teams like put into it, right? So like it's like when you're like you were saying, like sometime, if L&D implements something and they ship it to everyone that uses L&D, since they do have more users on the network than any of the other node implementations. Like, that does create, I think, some pressure for the other implementations to figure out what they've done and make it such that their users can also use those tools. But again, like, I mean, that kind of goes back to like writing it down, making it a spec so that like everyone's playing off of like the same, knows what they're like, how to like do follows or whatever, right? The nice thing about writing what you're doing down also means that um you get more eyes on it and you get more opportunity for people to like point out problems, give feedback, maybe do a little bit of like what color is the bike shed, of that like type of thing. But I mean, the whole idea about having a spec and having a written down explanation that anyone can come up and look at and see how that's working, is that, it allows us all to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page with stuff, as it goes. And yeah, like that's a process that like requires the people who are building the platform to kind of all chip in and like do collaboratively. And if we're not all collaborating together on that kind of stuff, then yeah, it does kind of lead to things where things aren't even and things can't talk to each other, or there's like problems and that sort of thing between implementations that like don't totally work. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, writing down what you're doing and explaining it so that other people can repeat it is like kind of the whole point of any sort of specification process. I think there's a lot of value in that, but it is a lot of work. I think is kind of what that goes back to. And it's work that isn't necessarily gonna make your project more successful in the long term. It just makes Lightning more successful in the long term.
So one thing I do just want to give like Alex or Justifer or Ryan,
I
who
see Ryan's on the stage now. Yeah.
a chance to sort of weigh in and express their thoughts. Alex, is there anything you want to kind of like?
Alex is gone on my screen.
Oh, yep, he is to me as well.
Because
Yeah,
another
yeah.
question.
I'll take the handoff.
Hit it.
Because I think it's like we're just in this really exciting and really interesting space for Lightning, where this process that was put in place, the bolts, right? I think it's 2.5 years ago, something like that, has worked like exceedingly well, right? We've had, to my knowledge, I don't think any really, huge thefts. We haven't had like any like massive network-wide outages. Like by all measurements, right? The growth of Lightning for the last 3 years has been like dramatically successful. And I think a really large amount of that is due to all of the rigor that went into the spec that Lisa described, all of the teams collaborating and working together, and building something and prioritizing, the Lightning Network as a whole, and over any one company's ambitions or anything like that. And I think that's like, I don't think there's anybody in the ecosystem, that would disagree about that, even though Bitcoiners by nature are, of course, very disagreeable. So I want to start off by saying that for sure, just in being very explicit. Where I think we're running into problems now is like this process is just having trouble scaling, right? It's having, as the ecosystem grows and as it's not just the three client teams that are building, the Lightning Network as a whole, but now there are companies like Zebedee, there are companies like Amboss, there are, companies like Strike, there's Bitcoin Beach, like, you just go down the list, right? There's hundreds of companies now that are building on the Lightning Network protocol, not just the three client teams. And not all of them are really interested in doing spec work, right? Like they're not interested in waiting for 2 of the client teams to test a new feature, make sure it's interoperable, and then allow them to release their feature to their users. Like they want the ability to proceed independent of the protocol, and like have a clean separation between what should be a protocol like TCP/IP that just works. It's very thin. It doesn't have like a lot of bells and whistles. It just does one thing and does it really well, right? They want that as a layer upon which to build an application to delight their users with, right? And so, I think like LNURL is like just it's the canonical example of something that the people working on the spec, right, for many reasons, didn't think it was really like the clean way, didn't think it was the best way, told themselves they would get around to building something better that's more kind of Lightning native. And now, like you look at where we are now, and LNURL is like probably the default way in every wallet that people interact with the Lightning protocol, right? And so I think it's just one of those things where, we're struggling to find the limits of where the spec, which should be prescriptive, which should say in order to count yourself as like a Lightning client, you have to do things this way, and then something that is descriptive, that is saying, if you are complying with the Lightning standards, here are some additional things that you can do, right? I think trying to find that line is what, if there is an argument or disagreement here, it's defining exactly where that line is, right? What are things that are Lightning features that are great that you can opt into if you'd like, and it would be nice if a lot of wallets supported them, and what are things that, in order to consider yourself like on the Lightning Network, you have to handle these things in this certain way, right? And I think it's just, the Bazaar approach, and that's Bazaar with two A's, not two Z's. The Bazaar approach to kind of application development, where we're letting a million flowers bloom, we're letting people experiment, we're letting them iterate to try and find out what features users really like. Is just, now that we have a stable protocol, now that it's been 3 years, and like we have interoperability on the network layer, letting the app layer experiment, find out what are the things that people really like, and kind of help guide some new feature development seems like a really good deal, rather than trying to force them to wait for new features until the client teams can agree on like prioritizing things. And so I think that that's where it's just trying to find a balance there, because what we've noticed obviously is like they're not going to ask permission or like wait for the client teams. What they're going to do instead is they're just going to innovate. They're going to build things. They're not going to write them down, and they're going to yell at me for not supporting them yet, because it's been a year since they posted on the mailing list, and LND still hasn't merged ZeroConf channels, for instance, right? Because we were waiting on the spec, and so it's one of those things where finding the ecosystem is scaling. We had a process that is 100% earned the credit and the respect of everybody involved for getting us to this point. We don't want to change the existing process at all. All we want to do is now recognize that there is this much bigger, broader ecosystem out here that is not involved in the process and does not care to be prescribed features. They want to experiment, and they want to describe those features. And if those features are deemed like consensus critical, so to speak, if they need to be prescribed, they should be prescribed into the spec. But otherwise, we should allow there to be some way for the app developers to communicate in like a standardized manner about what new features are adding, why they did it, and like how to write it yourself if you'd like to.
Yeah, so I want to I actually think you pointed, I think there's a lot of things that you mentioned there, but one that I think is really interesting and kind of goes with this really amazing book that I picked up recently. So I just started reading this book called The Elements of Networking Style. It's by a guy named Michael Padlipsky, and he actually worked on the original ARPANET project. He was a member of the basically U.S. government team that was building out the original protocols that now we know of as the internet. And it's funny because he This book I'm reading again, it's called The Elements of Networking Style, is like kind of this tongue-in-cheek, like kind of difficult to read screed against how protocol development kind of matured and changed like after the original like ARPANET, and like how TCP packets would be like put together, how that like spec process sort of devolved over the years. And one of his biggest criticisms about how the specs started being written after like a couple decades or whatever of like existing is that they moved from what was a descriptive style into what Ryan was calling a prescriptive style. And he was saying that's like absolutely not the way to go. I don't know. I just thought it's funny because like it's not something I had really ever thought about until I started reading this book like last week. But it's funny to hear you like basically advocating for the thing that this like very early protocol developer is like really explicit about in this book he's written, where he's like, that is definitely not the way you should move on your protocol development stuff. Sorry to like, I know that's like kind of a
Well,
hard
hold
thing
on,
to
because
like.
you said it. No, because so you said he said the wrong way to go is to move towards prescriptive.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, but what the
That's
bold process is right
well,
now, it's prescriptive.
no, it's descriptive, yo. It's very descriptive.
No,
Well,
it
maybe
says it's prescriptive because if you don't comply with the spec, then you're out of compliance. You have to do it this way. It is prescribed
no,
that
but
you
that's a
handle.
description of how it works. It's well, whatever. All right. Maybe prescriptive and descriptive aren't necessarily the most like descriptive terms. But as like a goal, I think that I agree that we should describe it should be descriptive and that it describes how exactly the protocol should work. And explain exactly like what steps we
Yes.
should take.
Mhm.
And that is a description of how it works rather than, I think prescriptive is more like goal oriented and kind of what outcome featured is, so to speak. Anyways,
No, that's yeah. I don't know. I pretty certain about the definition of prescriptive, and it's saying in order to comply with a feature, this is how it's prescribed. This is how you must handle an HTLC when it's being forwarded. Whereas descriptive is if you would like to accept a zero conf channel, like this is how we as Breeze or Moon or Async or something like that. This is the description of how we do it. But you
yeah,
don't
but I
have to
think
do
what
that if you wouldn't
I
like to.
think what you're basically saying that like interoperability should not be a goal. I feel like.
No.
No,
That's not it.
I don't think
That's not
so.
it at all. It's that there are some things that in order for the network to be interoperable, like this is what I'm saying is that there are some things that I absolutely agree should be in the spec, right? How to forward an HTLC, like every Lightning node should handle that exactly the same way. There should be no ambiguity about it, right? Like and the hard thing that I think as an ecosystem we're a little bit struggling with here is the line between what are the things that must be handled a certain way by everybody in order to maintain interoperability, for the very important reason that anybody can spin up a new client and write their own thing and be able to interoperate with the network. And then what are things that can proceed independently and are not like a must for interoperability? Like I think like we totally agree, Lisa, on like the things that are required for interoperability, that they should be written and created in the way that like things have been done. And I'm again, I feel like I've been very explicit that like the existing build process has done a very good job and it works really well. And we're not trying to change the way that new like mission critical interoperability critical features get added. And I don't think anybody has advocated for that. It's just simply saying that there is this new class of features that do not require interoperability, that are being developed already externally, extra protocol,
Okay,
right?
but if
And we
they
should just have
don't
a place for them to be
require
written
if they
down.
don't require interoperability, I don't understand why there would be a need to write that down. If it's not something that needs to interoperate, then sure, like go off and do the thing that doesn't need to interoperate. Like you're not gonna contribute. That's not gonna be like an open specification process, though. And I think we're both on the same page in terms of like, if you want things to be repeatable, if you want people to adopt your stuff, you should write it down and put it somewhere, like that it's in a spec level process. And like whether that's something like where that lives, like more of those documents existing, I think, and being written by the people that developing the software would be great. I don't think anyone would like. I don't think it would be a net detraction if more people started publishing how they're
Yeah,
doing things. Like I think
exactly,
that sounds like a
exactly.
great idea.
And that's really like literally just that. What you just said is the perfect description of what we're trying to achieve, because like we have this ecosystem of developers that are building on LND that are just, they're like, well, like, yeah, like we kind of tried, the mailing list once or twice. Like we like thought about joining, the Lightning Dev meeting, but saw that like the agenda was slammed. Like we're just going to go off and build it ourselves. And like, if we need help from you, like we'll ask, rather than it being like a very open, like, look, if you have a proposal, or a description of a new thing that you're doing and you'd like to get eyes on it, like just write it in this repo. Here's this like nice standard format that works not just for Bitcoin, not just for Ethereum and like tons of other general crypto projects. It works for Python, right? Like this improvement proposal process is like, pretty battle tested. Just write it down, drop it, and maybe you'll get some feedback, maybe you won't, maybe people will adopt it, maybe they won't, but at least it'll be documented, and like here's a way to make it easy for you to do that.
So I wanna give the other people that are up here a chance to sort of like weigh in. Like, what are your thoughts? I think this is a super important conversation, and I don't know. I just feel really appreciative, Lisa, that you were able to jump in. I know I messaged you on the side and was like, get in here, and Ryan, uh, JC, Vivek, uh, Justifer. What are your thoughts, Michael?
One thing that comes to mind after Ryan, I love what you said about this ecosystem is maturing rapidly, almost too fast. So
Wait. What
so
does
like
too fast mean?
kind of it's that like any of these like protocol developments, like commercialization is happening like really rapidly. There's businesses building on this protocol like at a time that the protocol is still somewhat in its infancy. Like it should be expected to change, and as the protocol expands, like the pieces that it actually has contained within the protocol, like as that protocol grows, like that might mean that it destroys business cases, because what Lisa was saying earlier is, as part of like protocol development, you're basically making this conversation between multiple parties. You're turning it into an optimized conversation. Like you're only saying what absolutely needs to be said, which might eliminate business cases where like businesses are solving problems, or for their customers, reducing complexity, or trying to streamline this issue that their customers might be experiencing. And so when a protocol makes a development, it might be a little bit concerning, because now you have businesses that were solving that issue before, but now it's part of the protocol, it's optimized, and now your business case is finished. So I don't know. Like, of course, like Lightning businesses have to stay ahead of the curve. If you're developing apps, you're going to have to be prepared to make big changes to this. At the same time that even the base layer is changing. Taproot is around the corner, so lots of changes ahead. So very interesting time, and super cutting edge. And sometimes that might be a little bit painful as protocols move in to business cases.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's definitely kind of a tension between, um, you know, this like what is the current state of the different implementations and what features they offer now versus like what the plan is to change in the future, and how there are maybe some gaps right now they're getting filled in and that at some point might get infrastructuralized, I guess, out in a way. But I need to hop off here, guys. But this is a really great chat. P, thanks for pulling me up here, kicking and screaming to chat. I wanted to like do like a short shout out to any lady specifically. Sorry, gents, you're not allowed. But if you're a lady Lightning node operator and you would like to hang out in like a witchy lady chat, we've been opening like channel pentagrams for fun and maybe some profit. Send me a
Yes.
DM and I will like add you to our little like lightning witch chat that we've got going on over on Telegram. Yeah.
I
All right.
love it. I think that's thank you so much for joining us. And I think that's super important. I think that you know, showing everyone that like this is not a space for like one specific group of people, and there's you know, Bitcoin and Lightning is for everybody is so important. I hope I don't know if you have already, but I would definitely recommend, and I'll encourage her to reach out to you as well. But like Aaron Malone is who just wrote a Bitcoin magazine piece is totally amazing, and I'd encourage you to reach out and you guys to connect.
Yeah, dope. Okay, cool. All right. Bye, friends. Talk to you later.
Adios.
Bye.
Good stuff. What do y'all think? We've been going for about 2.5 hours. You know, good solid chat. You know, honestly, I can I can talk about Lightning for days, and I
Same.
don't. I'm down to keep going, but I want to you know, ask the speakers who are up on stage. Are there other things that y'all want to dive into? You feeling like you want to close it out? Ryan, Vivek, JC, Jestifer,
I'm
everybody.
happy to keep going. I just freed up some time. Was on a couple calls earlier, but I like what Ryan said about like, you know, the ecosystem has grown. Lightning Labs has definitely done a great job fostering that early community in their Slack group. I remember seeing the OG days when it was just like Jack Maulers in there, and you actually, you know, you get Alex Bosworth for the most part. Now it's like so many people, but we did run into like CVEs and stuff like that in 2019 that were really bad, but you know, we made it through that too. So it hasn't been like, I guess, perfect, but it's been good.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always going to be bugs, and yeah, those CVEs in 2019 were definitely not very. But I meant like on the network level, right? Like, I think I saw a stat yesterday that there's been like $400 million in DeFi exploits this year. Like,
Oh damn.
we're a lot fucking better than that, right?
Yeah.
let's remember here that we're mostly all on the same team, and there are these yahoos next door building their casino and just stealing from people left and right. So we're definitely doing a lot better job than they are.
I
The
know
irony.
it is so wild to hear. Like, I mean, just the the everything that's happened that just continues to happen on Ethereum. You know, where the idea, you know, like miner extracted value is just the craziest fucking thing to me. That basically that was kind of published as like, hey, this is an exploit. It's fucked up. And then the Ethereum Foundation and everyone involved was like, no, 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 no. It's a feature, not a bug. You should get fucked by miners. It's part of the process. That just is insane to me. And I talk about this a lot, but I think one of the things that's so compelling to me about Bitcoin and of course the Lightning Network, which is built on top of Bitcoin, is that the incentives there are not only is it are these incredibly robust protocols, and they, you know, the Lightning Network is still in development. We're still figuring this stuff out as we've been talking about today, but that the incentives are really, really powerful, and they're really nuanced, and they allow us to both, you know, succeed as individuals and also succeeding as individuals means succeeding as a larger community. And I think that's a really, really unique thing about Bitcoin. And it certainly does not exist in any of the other shitcoins that are out there. And it's an amazing thing. It's pretty remarkable.
I don't think there's a shitcoin that we could necessarily build Zebedee on, for example, because when you're dealing with so many transactions and you need a blockchain that can really, or rather a protocol that can really scale, you don't want a blockchain. And that's one of my favorite things about Lightning is that there's no global state. There isn't a blockchain. It's backed by a blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, which is amazing. Obviously, billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and probably more computing power than any other thing in the world, or any even probably if you took the Bitcoin computing power, I don't think all the other computing power that exists would match it for any other thing combined. So yes, it's backed by a blockchain, but itself does not use a blockchain, and that's why it's able to scale while still letting you be in control of your private keys and not making that what I feel like is the biggest compromise.
JC, I thought when you were going to say you couldn't imagine Zebedee being built on using any other blockchain, I thought you were going to say because if we used a different blockchain, everyone would just immediately quit, and that's why it wouldn't work.
Oh no, I'm sure there are plenty of people that would love it. I mean, I get messages all the time like, "Why don't we make a token?" Or people ask me, "Hey, what blockchain do you guys do your game logic on? Like, which blockchain do you use for the games to run?" And I'm like, "We don't run our games on blockchains because that would be stupid."
I feel like that's one of those situations where you kind of, if you're meeting in person, you kind of like bring them in. You're like, "Hey, come closer, come closer. I have something to whisper to you," and then you just slap them. And you're like, that's what you get for asking.
Yo, JC,
Terrible question.
you want me to 10x your sales right away? All you gotta say is Infuse is a blockchain. It has a database, and then you're done. So your company's gonna get acquired immediately.
Oh god, yeah. Just be like, but what blockchain is it? Look, don't worry about it. Do not worry about the answer to that question. It doesn't matter. The point is,
or just
blockchain.
Always say yes. P. Whenever they say. You just always say yes. Is this running on a blockchain? Yes.
Yes.
Is this Counter-Strike?
This is an append-only database. Yes.
Hey, I have a question for Ryan. Is there at BitBlock Boom last year? You guys, I was speaking with you about some of the things that are going on in LND's development, and one of the things that I thought sounded really cool. You mentioned something about developing I thought you said you're about to release a plugin architecture for LND. Was that released, or has there been any movement on that, or what can you tell us about? I mean, people. It seems like people have mostly decided to write wrappers around LND, which provides largely the same functionality. But a lot of people like plugins. Is there any movement on that?
Yeah, no, that was me just being dumb and not really understanding the tech all that well. I think what I was alluding to was if you look at how we've packaged up the LitD Lightning Terminal repo, right, which is LND plus loopd plus poold plus Faraday, it all runs as one blob. I was envisioning, app developers could develop, kind of like what you said, their own little wrapper, their own little daemon that has, the ability to get a macaroon from LND itself, and then hit certain APIs and make kind of higher level calls. That's what I was alluding to. It is definitely, I think, now that I have a better understanding of actually how C Lightning's plugin architecture works, ours is definitely different, and definitely it still has to be a separate process that's hitting LND as far as I know, but I'm probably not the best person to answer that question.
Ryan, people love gRPC too, right? That's they rave about that. So I don't necessarily know that C Lightning. Yeah, you're right. Definitely is plugin focused, but I think a lot of people really appreciate the way LND is done also.
Yeah, for sure. I certainly have been. I certainly enjoy the gRPC interface as well. there's something magical about writing a plugin where a command that you wrote shows up on the console when you do the C Lightning help command, and you're like, oh, my command is there now. It feels cool. But yeah, the wrappers can do the same things though, so that's nice.
Yeah. So sorry for shilling a little out of turn. Hope to see you at BitBlock Boom again this year, here in a couple weeks.
You going,
I'll
Ryan?
be there.
I made it.
Yeah,
I figured it out.
My man.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Vivek, you going to be there?
No, I canceled.
God
I'm kidding.
damn it.
Yeah,
I'm so
it's
excited.
gonna be so fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be there for the whole week. Hit me up.
All right, folks. I'm going to go get some food. But great chatting with everybody. Thanks, Bitcoin Mag, for hosting.
Yeah,
See you,
dude,
Ryan.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you
jumping
so
in.
much for hosting. See you at BitBlock Boom.
Yeah. It's been a great chat. All right, I think I'm going to wind it down, close it out, but
I have one question for Justifer.
oh, hit it.
He's now a Vagrant routing node operator. How does that work? How do you do that? That's pretty badass, but like, what's your secrets, man?
5G.
Ooh, wait, vagrant. Does that mean like traveling?
like nomad.
Yeah. I'll be looking into different solutions. So it might be voltage, or it could be Greenlight.
Ooh.
I don't know. You haven't invited me yet, so
All right,
we'll see.
P, like just leave the room for 1 second. Justifer, reach out to
God
me
damn
at vk@blockstream.com. See what I can do for you.
No. Look, I reached out to you first. You cannot give Justifer, even though he runs an incredibly important part of the Lightning ecosystem, and all I do is shit talk and run and do my thing.
Pete, turn Plebnet into a Delaware C Corp or like a nonprofit foundation. You got it.
No,
Okay.
no, fuck that, man. Plebnet is all about the plebs. It's a collective. Everyone gets to participate. There is no corporation. Corporations are
Hey, can
evil.
you use Greenlight for routing though? Because you have to sign with a hardware device or with a separate device.
So, like the whole aspect about Greenlight is essentially that you don't have to worry about the balancing of capacity or routing. It's more for like rapid onboarding for noobs, and it's like a back-end type of thing versus like your specific front-end solution for it.
Wait, hold on. Maybe I misunderstood. I understood Greenlight to be like a fully functional Lightning node, where
Yes.
it's basically like a virtualized, it's like a VPS, it's like running it on
Yep.
AWS, except for it's at
It uses
scale.
private channels, I think.
Yep.
No, but it doesn't.
Oh, wait, hold on.
That's not the problem. The problem is that it doesn't have your keys, so you can't route unless it had your keys, of course, or unless you had your keys, 24/7 accessible to it in some way. So
Yeah,
but I
so
mean,
private channels essentially.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that Greenlight does not allow you to have public channels?
You could, but you couldn't route, P, because you can't sign to route. You have to sign the channel state. So the whole point of it that I saw,
Everybody would know
the
channels
point
if you had them.
No.
the whole
Okay,
whole
wait.
point of it, from what I see, is that you can have VPS, but it doesn't have your keys, so they can't steal your money. Well, how would you route on something that doesn't have your keys?
Oh man, okay, I misunderstood. I thought Greenlight was basically there's this thing that like me and a bunch of other I'm not the only one who's thought about this, but I'm kind of obsessed with this idea. I want to have a Lightning node where the private keys are stored in an HSM, which is to say a physical hardware device, or a virtualized HSM on something like AWS Nitro, which can do this, right? Because the problem if you're using like a cold card, which can be run in essentially HSM mode via CK Bunker, the problem there is that a cold card still takes seconds to sign any transaction, and that doesn't scale. You can't run a Lightning node on where basically it takes seconds to sign every single transaction. It's just not feasible. So I thought that basically Greenlight was a system where it was a full node, but that you'd have the keys either in some separate physical, basically like you'd have your keys running on a local computer, and then basically it would connect to the virtualized node, and then it would be signing in real time
That's what I
constantly.
believe is right, P, but I haven't looked at the inner intricacies. And there's like a bunch of keys. You know, it's not just one key. I believe there's
Of
like
course.
5 or 6 keys and different like base points for the revocation. Like there's a
Yep,
bunch of
totally.
shit. So I'll wrap my head
But
around
you
it
could,
more, and then we'll chat.
okay, let me know. But JC,
but,
you
but
could run that locally. Like you could have your
no,
keys
but
stored.
if
What?
you, it doesn't matter if it's on an HSM, because if you're routing, like it only matters if you have to approve each transaction. That's the point. Because if without your approval, then
You have to
the
create
owner
a
of the
HTLC, is what he's saying. You have to like pass it along.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So without your approval, unless you were approving every transaction, whether it's on an HSM or not, unless you were personally approving every transaction, then somebody
No,
could steal it from you.
no, you wouldn't have to. Basically, you could have your private keys
No,
running on a local machine, and then
but then they can
basically
steal from you, even though it's on your local machine, because that
they
VPS
could.
is calling your money. That's the
Totally,
point, is where
totally.
it can't be stolen from.
Well, they could, but it does add a layer of security in the same way that basically having an isolated, like an HSM in itself, right? Like people will argue like, well, I mean, what's the point of even having an HSM if it's physically connected to your node anyway? Like it's still essentially like someone can basically hack your HSM through the data connection because it's plugged in all the time and signing transactions all the time. But
Well,
the answer is that like you can have a hardened, like an HSM is a hardened device. So you could set up a hardened local server that basically did nothing else but hold these keys and then was connected to your your node in the cloud, and then that would be one way of basically setting up this kind of secure or a
yeah, but
Can I?
you wouldn't hack the HSM. You'd just hack the LND and say, "Hey, send me all your money," and it would send a little transaction to the HSM that'd say, "Okay, here's a signature."
no, I mean I agree. It's not, I'm not saying it's like
You could have logic on your node that forbids it from accepting doing such a thing, though.
exactly like so it's not a perfect solution, JC, but it does have the potential to significantly increase your security. Like basically
Oh,
like like I mean what would happen is I mean
yeah. What I
I
thought it
have a
was
question
like
for you.
I have to approve every transaction with a external key, which I like better. If it isn't that, then I'll like it less.
yeah, I mean I have a dream of like you have, I mean, again, this is the whole idea of like multiple keys, right? Where like it'd be really cool if like there were keys for routing. There's a separate, set of keys for routing payments. There's a separate set of keys for sending payments, that are not where you're basically sending payments to somebody else, like all those things. And I think it's feasible, but I think it'll just depend on like what actually gets shipped, initially, and then what is built out going forward. But I think that's the future of of kind of Lightning, right? Like I think like I'm excited for the idea, and you honestly you can do this today. You can run an AWS hosted Lightning node that has all of the private keys stored in a separate AWS Nitro instance, and even that increases your security. Though you're right, like obviously, like it's all like you still could mess things up, but even hosting it in two separate instances that are um, that are running,
Isolated.
yeah, that are isolated, that even that increases your security significantly because you can limit the throughput and the types of transactions that can happen between the two instances.
Sure, but
Sandbox your seeds.
if it's routing, it's doesn't matter what you do. Like it doesn't matter what kind of. I mean, sure, you can give it limits like, oh, you're only allowed to route X amount per whatever. Sure, you can do that, but like if it can route, then it can sign without your permission. Then it can take however much money it's allowed to route at a time.
Totally. But it allows you to create those kinds of firewalls. Whereas right now, the way that we all run LND or whatever implementation you're running, it's basically like all's fair in love and war. You know what I mean? Like the keys are just
That's true.
there.
But the big difference, I would say, with Greenlight though, is like you are trusting another entity to run your node. Like your node's not being hosted on my server. If it were, you wouldn't want me to be able to sign even with your HSM.
Pete, I have a question about your one of the comments you made when describing your HSM idea. You said that it wouldn't be scalable if your HSM had to sign every routing transaction because it would take it several seconds, or at least that's what I interpreted you as saying.
Oh,
Is
sorry.
Could you
I was
elaborate?
yeah, absolutely. I was speaking specifically. So Cold Card, produced by NVK and CoinK, you can run a cold card in what's called CK bunker mode, which is really novel because HSM, which stands for Hardware Security Module, right? So every large business, like if you're a bank, if you're transacting in anything that's basically it needs to be secured, and you need to have like maximum security, you will be running what's called a hardware security module. It's literally like a special little computer. It's honestly it's similar to a hardware wallet that you basically plug into your servers, and it has very, very limited bandwidth. And all that little miniature computer, which is essentially like a USB dongle, does is it signs, cryptographic signatures. Or it's a signing device. And so those devices that are basically designed to do that for like bank level security, they are tens of thousands of dollars, and they can sign many hundreds if not thousands of transactions per second. So one of the really, really cool things that I love about Cold Card is you can use a Cold Card, which is like an $150 device, in this CK bunker mode, which is essentially it's a hardware security module. It's the same thing, and it costs fractions of a penny compared to what a sort of an enterprise level HSM costs. Although my understanding is that there are enterprise level businesses that are using cold cards for this purpose as it relates to Bitcoin. And the difference is that a cold card is designed to be able to sign like a single transaction, like where you literally like you can use it in air gapped mode. You create a PBST, a partial or PSBT, partially signed Bitcoin transaction. You transfer it over, you sign it. It takes a couple seconds. You then transfer it back to your computer and you broadcast that transaction, right? So in CK bunker mode, where you have your cold card plugged in via USB directly to a node that's running, you can set up all these rules. Like you can create a 2 of 2 multi-sig, and then you can have like your cold card stored in some random location connected to a node, and then basically it's like it will only sign transactions if it's the third Tuesday of every month and the transaction is a multiple of whatever arbitrary rules you want to make, right? And that adds an additional layer of security. The problem is that if you want to try to use a similar system for a Lightning node, Lightning nodes are signing transactions constantly, like multiple times, potentially, multiple times a second. And because of the hardware that a cold card runs, it just can't run the math fast enough. So you need a more powerful signing device in order to be able to, or a better system in order to be able to essentially separate out your private keys from your Lightning node. And as of right now, that's not something that's super feasible. Right now, if you're running a Lightning node, your private keys are stored on the computer, whether virtualized or physical, that is actually doing all the signing. So
So
eventually.
let me go to this. One of the points that I was interested in is the one where you said that Lightning nodes are potentially signing many transactions, or very, very many transactions in a short period of time. So the kinds of transactions a Lightning node signs are state updates when you're sending a payment, state updates when somebody's routing through you, and fee policy updates where you change your HTLCs to match the new fee settings. Is that enough to where a typical Lightning node is making more than, say, 5 transactions a minute?
If you're a big routing node, potentially.
Right, potentially. I'm wondering, does anyone have the experience of does anyone in here who's speaking, I guess, have a node that has done more than 5 transactions a second?
Probably. I know, well, the Zebedee node gets hammered on big event days and does more than 5 a second. It maxes out basically. We have to run multiple.
No, it's a great point though. You're asking a great question. The answer is no. I have not had that experience. So your point is a fantastic one, which is like I personally, my own self, should be able to run. I could in theory store my keys on a cold card, and the number of transactions that I'm making per day is a dozen, 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen, or the number of signing events, and that ultimately is probably going to be fine. The issue though is the delay, right? Like when I make my understanding is that the latency that is going to be caused by each individual transaction because of the time it takes to sign those transactions is unacceptable. And this is something that I have heard because I basically had the view that like, let's just figure this out for cold card. But then actually it was Michael Tidwell who was talking about this and was like, yeah, it's never going to work. Like
Pete,
those transactions.
is it the, I don't know if it's necessarily the hardware aspect of it or the fact that CK Bunker it's over Tor, right?
Well, let's separate it out from whether it's cold card or not. But to is it Geeselight, or how should I pronounce your handle?
I intended it as Geistlight, but I don't really care.
Oh, the
Geistlight.
trigger.
That sounds way better. Geistlight. Oh, that's
Geistlight
good.
triggers.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So
no, it's Geist is ghost in German, so it's ghostly light.
Interesting. Okay. So my understanding, and it's an uninformed one, is that the delay that would be caused by signing a transaction on something like a cold card, but we don't have to focus on that specifically, would be unacceptable given the speed that an HTLC in theory needs to be transmitted on. But maybe that
Well, I know
thinking about that.
When I make Lightning payments every day, and most of mine seem to be in flight for somewhere around like 9 seconds. And so if there was an additional 3-second delay added onto that because my HSM was doing something, I'd probably take that trade-off and be like, okay, they'll take 12 seconds instead of 9 on average.
So some things are doing more than one thing at a time, like the Zebedee node, and that's probably you probably did hear this from Tidwell because our node, when we have a big event, we like yesterday we had an event where 3 servers running at a time. Each server could take 16 people, so that's potentially more than 40 people, and all 40 of those people are going to want to log in with their Lightning nodes at the same time. And for that, you're going to need signatures, and for that, you're going to need like a lot of similar. You can't, like, if the thing takes 3 seconds for a signature, wait 3 seconds times 40, and then delay the whole game until everybody can get on.
Yeah, I would. Well, I don't think a company like Zebedee would be the use case for somebody who wants a security module. Would be you don't need a hardened setup because you're doing a tournament for one day.
We could use an HSM, but it would be a faster one, which I think was Pete's point.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think this is Gisela, you're making great points. There are different use cases for this type of system, and a Zebedee or a Fold or whatever is going to have a very, very different.
Oh yeah, Fold. I bet they get a bunch.
Yeah, they're going to have a very different use case than me as an individual. So you have you've reinvigorated my excitement about the possibility of using a cold card in CK Bunker mode or something similar to have
as the poor man's way of doing the more robust setup. That
I wouldn't even. Yeah, totally. I mean, I wouldn't even call it like the poor man's version. I think it's just about the amount of infrastructure that one needs to meet their use case. And one of the reasons that separate from what I think is a critical need for us to be running Lightning nodes on our own physical hardware. Like I certainly plan to always run a physical node that I control that's not in my house because that would be terrible security. But like having a node that's like running in another location that's built on hardware that I provisioned and all that stuff. And I also plan to run a node that is virtualized or that is hosted on whether it's AWS via Terraform or Greenlight or whatever it is. I think having both those systems in place is really valuable. And I love the idea of having these kind of various levels of scaling, because you're absolutely right. Not every entity that is running a Lightning node needs to be able to run a gazillion transactions per unit time.
And Vivek, thank you so much for that early invite to Greenlight. That
You
was really
God,
fantastic.
God fucking
Vivek,
damn it.
thank you that you also gave me an invite. I really appreciate that.
Vivek, we're gonna have to talk later.
I don't know if I was supposed to say that out loud. All the people that are waiting for an invite. I'm sorry.
You know, I'm not angry.
I thought you weren't listening.
I'm not angry. I'm just furious. So let's.
Has anyone, when Electrum came out with their Lightning implementation, you know, I jumped right on it and started playing with it because I thought it was, because I liked when new stuff like that comes out and wanted to test it and give them feedback. And the impression I got at the time, because I was giving them feedback and talking to them and listening to their announcements, it seemed to me that they were doing something very similar to what Greenlight is doing, where most of the hard stuff that a node does is done by Electrum servers, and then the client does the easy stuff like holding onto its own keys. But channel route or finding a path is outsourced to Electrum servers, and running a watchtower is outsourced to Electrum servers. Obviously, your key, your public key is outsourced to those so that they know all of your transactions. It sounds to me a whole lot like what Greenlight is doing. Has anyone explored or thought about what Electrum is doing from that perspective, or maybe can correct me if my understanding is? It seems like they're doing very similar things.
I have no idea, unfortunately. I
wish that there were more Electrum people talk, like the people from C Lightning and people from LND often go on podcasts and talk to others, and they share what they're doing, what things they're working on. But people from Python or people from Electrum and people from Async, at least here in America, they don't seem to do that. I've heard of Async. I assume they're doing that over in France where they're based, but here we don't get to hear from them, and I don't really hear the Electrum people go on podcasts and talk about how their systems work and what they're doing.
If you know them, tell them to hit me up. I'm going to be running these rooms regularly, so I would love to get them in here.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, I just want to jump back to one thing that was said before, which is the statement was made that Greenlight is going to be running on private channels, and I'm not sure where we kind of landed on that, because again, my understanding was that Greenlight would be running on public channels. It would essentially be just it would be the same as running a node on AWS. It would just be kind of a turnkey solution for that.
But there's no keys.
My impression from the beginning was that they would be doing private channels. So I mean, the beginning, as in like 3 days ago. Somehow that settled in my mind. I don't know. Nothing comes to mind that can justify why I think that, but the impression is strong.
Huh.
Well, if you're not routing, you wouldn't want to be public. And I'm just assuming. I mean, maybe they do like have the ability to get like something like an HSM or just software running on your computer or something to sign. But to me, that would defeat the purpose of what it is, because I don't think it adds a meaningfully different amount of security. Like for yourself, yes. If you have a server in your home, you want to put the keys on HSM, maybe also because those keys have access to other funds and do other things or whatever. Like you don't want somebody to be able to get the keys, even though they can sign stuff. It's not as big of a deal as getting the keys themselves. But running your node on somebody else's hardware, keeping the keys on an HSM in your possession, like to me, that doesn't really give you any meaningful like new level of security there. I guess I can't take the keys, but it doesn't really matter because they own the hardware.
They if any of them was to do that setup that Pete is describing as what he wants, I imagine it would be C Lightning, the C Lightning team, and one reason why is because where they store the seed in the internal structure, when you generate a new wallet, it's stored in a file that's called HSM secret. And in some of the podcasts that Rusty's been on, he described the reasoning for that is because of an assumption that in the future, the way C Lightning will typically be used is by institutions that do keep their seeds on a hardware security module. And so they designed Seed Lightning to assume that it's getting the seed from an external device, and that's easier to do if they all from.
And I should clarify too. Like, of course, like you do get a lot of security from an HSM when you have to authorize each transaction from the HSM. Like, if you need me to physically, like with your hardware wallet, say yes, I want to sign this every time, that's great. But if it's just like signing everything you ask it to sign, well, maybe with some rules on top, I don't think that's as great.
Like it depends on what your rules are, right? You're the rule you put on top could be ask me every time, and then it would be
right,
no different.
That's a rule that I think is meaningful.
Yeah, but it could be it could be something like to authorize 10 transactions of up to 10,000 sats each, and then if someone tries to go beyond that, notify me through an email, and then I have to prove it. Any ones that happen after that.
That would just be like. I think that's too much of a compromise for routing, which is why I think, private channels make sense. Although I don't know what kind of channels they use, but like if you've got public channels and you have to authorize you can't authorize a route. I mean, you're talking about 3 seconds for routing. Imagine, sending you an email every time you want to route something, or so not you want to route something. Somebody wants to route for you. You're going to answer an email and make a few sat fees.
Approve anything that increases my balance. Don't approve anything that reduces my balance unless I say so.
You have to do both when you route. You have to, you increase and then you decrease at the same time atomically.
So you could have an overall rule. Always approve it if it increases my total number of sats. Always decline it, or not always decline it, but always ask me if it reduces my total number of sats. That would be a cool rule.
Do it.
Yeah, maybe they're doing something like that, but then the HSM, of course, has to know like what all your other channels are doing. It would basically be a whole computer running like a node, and then why weren't you running a node in the first place? Because remember, the idea of this thing is to make it easier for you.
Well, no.
If they were doing that, that would be such a cool function. It would have been in the announcement. It would have been like, and we developed this whole hardware security emulator that has all these things baked in. That would be a huge part of this. Of their announcement, it wasn't. All they announced was the cloud node thing.
I wish Alex Schoof was in here because he is an expert in this stuff, but I don't think it necessarily would have been. I think that this opens the door for us to be able to implement these kinds of things. But and again, JC, I want to stress, like, even if it seems trivial, having these the separation of concerns does increase your security. So like even if you're running even if you're running a node on AWS and then you literally have another AWS instance running that is just hosting the keys, like that's a valuable.
No, yeah, it is. But in that case, of course, Amazon can steal your funds. It's not about like anybody can steal my funds.
Totally.
So the idea is that like, can Blockstream steal my funds? And I don't know if the answer is yes, then it's not as great of now. Like, does it give me more security than like if nobody else can steal my funds? Only Blockstream can steal my funds. That lowers my attack surface tremendously. But I'm pressing Blockstream.
Do we know if as a kind of a parallel topic, does Breeze only use private channels?
Yeah, because you can't route on your phone.
Fuck.
No, they have public channels for like not for you, but for themselves in the
It's not the same. I really want to open public channels with my Breeze wallet.
Why? You can't route with it. So like you would be
useless.
Like, yeah, people would, and then worse than that, like people would I guess it wouldn't matter to you because you're not routing anyway, but people would try to route with you and fail, and then they'd put you on their blacklists as a bad router. But there is somebody developing a Lightning wallet which will route on your phone.
That's what I want. That's the only thing I want. Y'all
it's
are
almost ready.
Dreams.
It's almost ready.
So look, I run a couple nodes on ThinkPads after getting inspired by Rajwinder, who's been advocating for this for, decades. He's been preaching about this stuff. But ThinkPads have a really cool thing. You can get a data-only SIM card and stick it into the back of a Lenovo ThinkPad, and that shit will just connect to the internet and be good to go. So
I think it's going to be either called Bitcoin Lightning Wallet 2 or Simple Bitcoin Wallet 2. It's the same dev from Simple Bitcoin Wallet, same dev that made Bitcoin Lightning Wallet. And Anton, I can't pronounce his last name. It's like Russian or something. Yeah,
Kalashnikov.
almost starts with a K.
Kolmai-Gorodsky.
Yeah, you just said it. That's the name, but I can't say it again, even though I just heard him say it. But yeah,
This guy's awesome.
he actually he's really awesome. Like, he's one of the smartest guys in Lightning, and he never, like, he's way out of the limelight. When I say he's one of the smartest guys in Lightning, what I mean is, well, first of all, he made the first mobile Lightning wallet, and in order to do that, because you couldn't do it with LND yet, you couldn't do it with Async yet, you couldn't do it with anybody else yet, he built his entire Lightning implementation from scratch to work on a phone. And then he also made it like quite good, and it's still one of the best ones, although it's not pretty. It's very deep. But then also he went on to create LNURL, which everybody uses LNURL now, and he created that from scratch.
He
as
also
well.
invented zero-conf channels, turbo channels, as they're popularly known.
The idea of turbo channels, which is used by everybody, including Breeze and the Refill, and Breeze modifies it. But yeah, he's the creator of most of the technologies. I want to say many of the technologies people take for granted today on Lightning, he made, and now his new wallet is going to be kind of the same thing. A whole bunch of new stuff that never existed before that people will probably eventually take for granted. And one of those things is you can route on it. Mobile wallet.
So fucking cool.
You can route on a mobile wallet, and it also supports split payments. So like you and your friend can both pay pay half of the same invoice. Like if somebody sends you an invoice for 25,000, you can split that up and say, "Hey John, I want you to pay 15,000 of this, and I'll pay the other 10,000." You can both hit pay, and that one invoice will get paid by you both, which is really cool. There's other cool things that are going to be in this new wallet that he's making. But he keeps teasing us. He's like, "I'm going to release it any day now." He's been saying that for like 4 weeks. So.
That shit kills me.
Not to mention the entire library, the Immortan library, which will allow other people to do these things.
Yeah, he wrote it as a library, and then the wallet is just an interface for that library. So it makes it so that anyone can do the same thing, which is really cool.
Interesting. All right, my friends, I'm going to close the room out. This has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate all of you for jumping in.
Wait, P, I want to delay the room for like another 30 more minutes.
I'll allow it. Let's do this.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, wait. There is an important question, which I actually I promised listeners that we would get to the bottom of in the first one, which was last Tuesday. And just for everyone listening, I'm going to be doing these every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So put it on your calendars. Brace yourselves for hilarity and deep lightning-based knowledge. But I promised that I would get to the bottom of is a hot dog a sandwich? And so what I'd like to close out this room with is just a quick survey of the speakers. Sorry, I was shoving a hot dog into my mouth. I'm going to start with Justifer.
A hot dog is a piece of meat, right?
No, wait, hold on. Wait, we got to go in order. This is important. It's important. We got to go in the order of the speakers as they are represented on my phone, which of course is different for everyone else in the room because Twitter lies to all of us and shows us as being the person in the top left corner when in reality we're all just toys, puppets to the Twitter algorithm. But I do want to hear your answer, Gislight, because it's important to me personally. But Justifer, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Thank you so much for having me and for hosting this. I'm just going to go ahead and take the opposite position of whatever Vivek says, and then I'll take it from there.
Fair enough. In that case, we got to skip. We got to throw the process that I just suggested to the wind. Vivek, is a hot dog a sandwich?
I will throw an exclusive OR gate to Justifer's not gate to JC.
JC, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Okay, well, you see, a hot dog is technically the meat, but then there's a hot dog bun, and then you put them together and you make a hot dog. I don't think it's a sandwich, only because we talk about what something is. We're talking about language, and have never heard anybody refer to a hot dog as a sandwich. So I would say no. I don't think a hot dog is a sandwich, but could it be described maybe as a type of sandwich by several definitions? Probably, but I think it's not one.
That was a very political answer. I accept it. I love it.
There's a guy in the audience named Jason Bajada, and he's a recording artist, but his bio says he's never seen Star Wars. And I just wonder, if you put it in your bio that you've never seen Star Wars, why didn't you watch Star Wars? Like, that would make me want to watch a movie if it was in my bio that I never watched it. Anyway, that's thinking that.
Then you'd have to change your bio.
I would have in my bio, but it's like one of those things like, don't think about elephants like you're going to think about elephants. Like, to put a movie in my bio, I'm probably going to have to watch it.
I wanted you to explain what Justifer's opinion was based on JC's opinion now that the gates have, flowed the electrons.
Good God. I'm going to leave that to you. I mean, I think you were the one who refused to answer the question and brought this nonsense into the world. You birthed this horrible monstrosity. It's up to you, my friend.
Is this Turing complete? Is this Ethereum?
I think what you're trying to say is you are Vitalik.
This is Ethereum.
So hot dogs are shitcoins. There you go.
You heard it here first, folks.
Shitcoins are not sandwiches. Well, actually, there is the most popular, the MEV trick on Ethereum is sandwiching. So maybe.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
Thanks for hosting, P. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Bitcoin Mag. Thanks all.
This was great, everyone. Thank you so much. Come back
Yes,
next time.
thank you.
Adios.
Bye.